Dari Monahan is still. Yes. Yes.
It is 7:01. I am calling the work session of the San Leandro City Council to order. Today is Monday, September 2024. At this point in time, there's a council member that would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So I've got Councilmember Azevedo. Please lead us. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point, Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Aguilar.
Present.
Councilmember Azevedo.
Present.
Councilmember Baloo is present. Councilmember Bowen. Councilmember Viveros Walton.
Present.
Vice Mayor Simon is not in attendance at the moment. Mayor Gonzalez.
Present.
Okay, noted. All members are present except for Vice Mayor Simon.
Okay, so at this point in time, Madam Clerk, before my announcement, I'd like for you to read your announcement.
Yes, thank you. If you would like to make a public comment during the meeting, you can do so in person or via Zoom. If you are present at the meeting, please complete a speaker card and submit it to the city clerk before your item is presented. If you wish to participate in public comment via Zoom, you can use the raise your hand tool when the item is called. During the public comment session, speakers will be invited to speak and will have a set time to share their comments. A countdown timer will appear for their convenience, and when the time is up, the microphone will be muted. All raised hands outside of public comment will be lowered to avoid confusion. Once public comment is opened, hands may be raised to speak. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of announcements for the benefit of the public since we have so many people assembled here. So we've got the AC Transit realign process going on. These cards are right outside the front door. There are public meetings that are being hosted on the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th. And so if you are interested about where bus lines run in San Leandro, the possibility that the bus line near you might be removed, have your voice be heard. They're at the final stages of making the decisions on which bus lines to realign and which ones to eliminate. To those of you that came in late, I was outside handing these reminders to please download the My San Leandro app. This is an excellent and easy way that increases the efficiency of city staff by putting a picture and a location and a short description of the problem, whether it's a pothole, illegal dumping, or other things, and it works very effectively. We literally have over 1,000 requests already satisfied in our very first quarter of launch. So for those of you that had the prior version of the app, that was based on a different technology that has been sunsetted. We literally could not continue to use the prior technology. So you must go to the App Store. This new app rolled out about 4 months ago. So please take advantage of that. And my last reminder relates to the large number of folks here. And I know there are differing opinions in this room, and so I'll just kind of give the general admonition that this is a place for civil discourse, where people are nice to each other, kind to each other, and you may have different opinions about what speakers are saying or not saying or could have said or you wish they had said. And so we remain respectful of every single speaker and every single point of view. Now the formal legal announcement. The city of San Leandro conducts orderly meetings to fulfill its mandate. Discriminatory statements or conduct that would potentially violate the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964 and or the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, California Penal Code sections 403 or 415 are per se disruptive to a meeting and will not be tolerated. Please see the City Council Handbook and the City Council Meeting Rules of Decorum for more information. Tonight, we will hear about the SeeClickFix app first. That should probably take about 15 to 30 minutes. Once we add council member comments, observations, and directions, maybe as much as 45 minutes. But you'll get to see and learn about the app. And then we'll move into what I think most of you are here for, which is a discussion around Lake Chabot Road. So at this point in time, I'm going to go to agenda item 3A and ask Chief Technology Officer Michael Seiner to kick off our presentation.
I'm good. Michael Seiner, Chief Technology Officer. I'm here to provide a brief presentation on the My San Leandro Mobile 311 app. I'm going to start with a little video.
Hey San Leandro, download the My San Leandro app today. Your ally in keeping our community beautiful. Report litter, potholes, and other quality of life issues. My San Leandro empowers you to take action. Join us in preserving our parks and public spaces. Visit sanleandro.org/report-a-concern to learn more. My San Leandro, your eyes, our action.
For those that could not hear, it was basically an ask. It said it lets you download, it lets you report potholes, trash, and other concerns. Please download the app. It was a very simple message.
Today we'll talk a little bit about the background of the previous MySL app and the reason for a change to a new platform. Go over some statistics and do a brief demo on how to download and install the app and end with a Q&A session.
And before moving on, I'd just like to do a sound check in the room. How was Mr. Don't get closer. How was Mr. Seiner? Are you able to hear him out there? Perfect.
So a little background, the Mobile 311 app has been in place for several years. However, the old platform was aging, had many challenges that we needed to address, and we also wanted to enhance community engagement and improve service delivery. Some key issues with the MySL original Mobile 311 application. There were many usability concerns, ultimately resulting in us having to take it out of the App Store. It was not supported, no longer supported by the vendor, which was a shock to us, but they announced that they were discontinuing support of the app. And so we needed to move to another platform. There was a difficulty creating user accounts, communication failures, and reporting was limited and cumbersome. Another thing that was missing that we wanted to implement was integration with our internal work order system, so that there was a connectivity between the two systems to improve efficiency. Some of the benefits we have with the new system, which is called SeeClickFix, that is a product by our website vendor. So the vendor that provides a city website is also provides SeeClickFix as an app. Easier app navigation, easier account setup, improved communication with real-time updates and notifications, a higher level of engagement, that also encourages community member feedback with enhanced efficiency and automated processes, reducing workload and improving service levels. A bit about the project. We begin alpha and beta testing in April and May. From June 6th to June 30th, the app was available to use, but not yet advertised. So it was a soft go live. And then we started with public outreach and promotion of the new system on June 30th with a formal go live. And since then, ongoing digital advertising campaigns have been released, as well as Highway 880 billboard signs and San Leandro Times ads and also mass mailers. So promotional videos done in English, Spanish, and Cantonese. So we've been live for a short time now, and good news is we have 278 enrolled community members using the app. We are trying to bump those numbers up. A goal is to get to 1,000 by the end of the year, and that is achievable. You can see the kind of breakdown. You know, we had a few users adding in April and May with the alpha and beta testing, then ramped up in June, and it's been pretty consistent June, July, and August. Hopefully you can read this. We've had since go live, we've had 1,889 issues reported. 500 of those are open. 1,387 were closed and resolved in one way or another. You can see the requests by type. That's a little hard to read. I apologize for that. But everything from vehicle, some of the biggest numbers we've received are, vehicle violations, overgrown vegetation, debris in the public right of way. And then there are many other categories that community members can choose to submit a picture and report the issue. So in the presentation, there are, which is available on the city website, there are links to download the apps. I do want to briefly show how to download the app. It's very simple. So, all right. Okay, so this is the iPhone app. Start this. All right, so this is the city website as viewed on an iPhone or Android. You can see when you click on the link to either Apple or iOS or Android, it pops up your app store so that you can download the app. Then once you have the app downloaded, you can open it. You can select a picture. Then it will geolocate to your location. You can also zoom around and select any location. And then once you have this location selected, there are categories to select from. And then you can provide a brief description once the correct category is selected. And you can either hide your identity from public view. You can submit anonymously. You can register so that we always know who's submitting, or you can hide the identity from public view. You have lots of options there. So this one's going to get submitted with just the guest. And then when you're logged in, you can see all the other requests that have been submitted. All right, that's the 90-second version. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Okay, so at this point in time, we will go for clarifying questions. After we get our clarifying questions addressed, we'll go to public comment on this item. Then we'll come back for any discussion that we might have. I'll begin with Councilmember Bowen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Micah, for the presentation. Oh, the mic is loud today. I I really appreciate this. Since we had the soft launch, I've had MySL linked on the bottom of my email, and I've been directing people there. And I think if I'm looking at the numbers correctly, so since June 30th, 72 days, we've had 1,889 tickets.
Yes.
And so that's a close rate of 73%. I'm like really excited by the potential for data and understanding how we can proactively address these quality of life concerns. What does this look like on the back end in terms of this information? And like some examples would be like obviously the types of tickets, how long until they're closed, location. Like you can see them all aggregated, but are we able to pull all of that out so we can try to figure out where we can be proactive with resources or staffing?
Absolutely. So that is a goal of the project, is to get to stronger integration with our back-end work order management system. So that we have a good integration, but a lot of the details on how the work's actually completed is in that back-end system. So that is something that we will improve over time. We would like to develop strong reports so that we can for each different type of category, we can look at, what is the mean time to resolution, what average time to resolution, what are our targets for resolution for each request type, because some take longer to get to than others, just based on some issues are more complex, require more staff, bandwidth issues. So like we really want to look at what is a target for turnaround on these, and then report against that on a regular basis. So that is something we're working on.
That's fantastic. And is there a way for us to be able to take the raw data on the back end and be able to translate it into a way where we could have it front facing to the public so that they're aware of the progress that we're making? And just to give context, when the numbers are like this, you realize just what the load is and the types of issues that there are.
Yeah, I think that's definitely doable. The level of detail is something we have to work out, but some kind of performance measurement and KPIs that are transparent to the community is something we can definitely look into.
Okay, wonderful. And I'm not sure if this is a question for you to answer or somebody else, but what's the process look like once somebody actually puts in a ticket order and says, here's a car that's been sitting here for 3 days? What happens then?
So it depends on the category of the submission, but in general, the way it works is it gets submitted from the SeeClickFix app that is integrated with our work order management system, which is managed by individual departments. So if it's a specific work order type, it would get assigned to that department. The department resolves the issue, hopefully, and then it gets status is changed, and then that gets reflected back in the app, so that that communication can happen.
Awesome, thank you.
At this point in time, I'll go to Councilmember Viveros Walton.
Thank you. Well, that ticked off 3 of my questions. So thank you, Councilmember Bowen. One, I just want to give you props for the multilingual integration here. I've submitted a couple of requests and noticed that there are several languages in the input. So just props for that. Appreciate that. My other question is regarding data privacy. What information is collected from a person who is creating a profile, and how are we protecting that data?
That's a good question. I'm going to pull in our project manager, Reggie John. He's available via Zoom. He led this effort from a project management perspective. And
Reggie, you can go ahead and speak.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reggie John,
Oh,
and
hold on.
I'm the IT project manager. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. So the data collection, I think it's the minimal amount of data we are collecting, just the email. And I think from the data privacy point of view, I think we are not storing anything other than the person's email address and the name, and they have the ability to submit anonymously as well. So from the data privacy point of view, not much is being collected, if I can put it that way, unless there's something specific.
No, I'm satisfied with that answer. If the only information collected is on the application is that, then, I mean, I'm okay with that answer.
Thank you.
My other question is regarding if a resident or a community member who's submitting something through a request through the app, if there is clarification needed, say not all the information is on whatever the input is not sufficient information for staff to follow up, what does that communication loop look like?
I think it's different for different departments, but in general, the work order gets submitted to the work order system, assigned to departments, and then assigned to individuals. And if there's not enough information or there are questions, it's the responsibility of the departments to reach out to the community member to seek clarification. And if it's anonymous, that makes it tough, right? So that is one of the advantages of registering. If we can get most people to register and provide their email, then if there are questions or follow-up needed, we have that opportunity. If it's anonymous, then we're kind of, we have to just do the best we can. Yeah.
So then the communication would be through the app. So is there a message? I have submitted whatever I needed and I haven't had the need to go back and forth with someone. Is there an ability to communicate through the app, or?
I'm going to defer to Reggie on that one. I don't believe that's happening much, but I could be wrong.
Yes, so I think the applicants or whomsoever is applying can go back and reply back. I think from the city point of view, there are two types of requests. One is internal. They could set it up as internal, where it just shows only for the city staff who are looking into the request. But I think if the city employee responds back as a public, it goes back to the public, and I think public has the option of responding back to the same request, and that goes back.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Michael, thank you for the presentation. My question has to do with regards with also data privacy. San Leandro, we are a sanctuary city. Are we sharing any of this information with or the third party sharing any information outside of their network?
I'm going to have to ask Reggie that. We might have to get back to you on that question. Like you're asking SeeClickFix, the company, are they sharing any statistics? I'm not 100% sure. Reggie, do you know the answer to that?
No, I'm not. Yeah, so
We'll
it is a
research
public.
that.
Yeah, it is a public. It's most of the data is available to the public on the number of requests, etc. But I think so that's what. Yeah, so we will research.
I don't think there's anything sensitive being shared, but the whole platform is used by many cities, and the data can be accessed. You can go and look at other cities and see what kind of requests have been submitted. So that data is pretty public, but the personally identifiable information is not being shared. I don't believe. We can verify that though.
I'd like to see some policy behind that with regards to also data retention. I know I just don't. The last thing I want is, any information being utilized and shared with ICE, and having some sort of data retention policy if something is closed, like a task order is closed. So I think that is something that we should consider and work on and finesse. My other question is with regards to a web browser. Is this accessible from a web browser?
Yes.
And folks can just log on and
You
put in
can,
their request?
you can use a laptop or a desktop and submit requests anonymously, or you can log in just like the app. Slightly more robust experience on the web, but basically all the same functionality is in the app too. So you can do that, or you can even use if you don't want to download the app, you could use the browser on your phone and take pictures and do everything the same way. It's just a little nicer with the app.
Okay, and I notice sometimes folks will utilize this app in case of an emergency. Is there a way that we can add a pop-up to automatically connect you to 911? So
That's an interesting request. I think we'd have to research that. That would probably be something that we'd have to check with the vendor and see if they may be working on something like that. I'm not aware of it being in the pipeline for the near future, but we could check.
okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
At this point in time, I'd like to go to Councilmember Simon, who is online.
Yes, hi, I have a question. Are people notified once the work is complete? Did I miss that already?
Understood that.
Yeah, so once the requests are closed,
Sorry,
the email,
Reggie, sorry, before you answer, I just want to repeat the question because it was a little bit muddled in the room. And I think if I heard you correctly, Councilmember Simon, it's are the submitters notified when the work is completed? Was that your question?
Correct, that's my question.
the
you,
answer,
Reggie.
short answer is yes. So when the request is closed, for sure they are notified. And I think the lot more notifications get sent. It's based on like what all there is something on the user preference, which all they want to be notified. So there's a lot of notifications that from what I have heard is it sends a lot more notifications than not. So the answer is yes.
At this
Okay.
point, I'm just gonna, before you go further, council member or vice mayor, I would like to make sure that there's an opportunity to clarify one additional piece here in the chamber.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, Councilmember Vice Mayor Simon. Your question was, are constituents notified when the work is complete? And so I think Reggie's more answering the ability for the system to do notifications. But as of right now, we are tightening up the process so that individuals who input a request into the system will be notified once the work is complete versus once the item in the system is closed.
Okay, and thank you. And my next question is, once we do get there with that capability, would we also be able to provide like documentation, like a photo, say there's overgrown weeds or something, and if staff's already taking photos of this thing, is there a way that we could show that documentation that work is actually complete?
So I will start here with Director Signer, and then you can allocate it.
That's definitely something we can look into. I believe that the capability is there to do that. It would be in addition to our current work process that we'd have to look at, but we can definitely look into that.
Thank you.
At this point in time, I'll go to Council Member Bowen.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councilmember Aguilar was talking, it made me think of a few questions. For clarification, the only information that is collected is an email.
I'm gonna double check with Reggie
More
that
information.
phone number is not also collected. I don't believe we're collecting address or any of that information, but Reggie, is phone number collected in addition to email?
I will like to defer it, and I think we'll get back on what all is being collected. So again, from what it looks like, a phone number, I think phone number maybe as well as the email address and name. As of now, that's what comes to mind.
Okay, and
That's what I thought, yes.
And the reason, at least the reason why I was encouraging people to be able to input their email was so then staff could communicate with them. Am I understanding the purpose of collecting the email and reporting it with information attached versus anonymously?
Correct. There's really no other benefit to it's the communication. If there needs to be follow-up questions or anything, that's the big advantage to having either a phone number or email contact so we can ask if we need further explanation.
And that map that shows where the locations of each of the concerns were reported, is that only information that we see on the back end?
No, these can be seen on the app.
Oh, you could see them too.
Yeah.
Oh, you could, to clarify,
This entire report isn't available on the app, but you can actually see submissions, local, and there is a map on the app I'm sorry, am I
no, okay.
understanding the
So
question?
I'm
Yeah.
trying to process that. Okay, so I could go on the app and see where, like if I put up my address,
Mhm.
I could see if somebody is unhappy about my shrubs. They're great. They're all native plants, but that's potentially what could happen.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay. And then I know on the website, we have a disclaimer that says that this is not monitored in real time. And so if it's an emergency, to call 911, correct? Online?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
It's not monitored real time.
Got it. And then is there a pop-up at
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that we're really clear on that answer. On the website, it says it's not monitored, call 911, or you're saying the physical app on the phone says that too? Because I think I remember seeing it online,
Mhm.
but I don't know that I've seen it on the phone. If perhaps Reggie, you can be looking,
Yeah,
because I don't want to create a misunderstanding about what it says.
yeah. So I don't believe, yeah, so we'll have to look back. Yeah, so Mayor, you're right. So I think on the web, it does clearly say that report to 911, but on the app, it's not clear. Yep, so we can follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
It's not intended to be emergency services. Yeah.
Got it. And then do we also, for the app, is there opportunity to provide feedback on use of the app so that it can be adjusted if needed?
So right now, that's something we're looking into. I think we might add a service request item that is just related to app feedback, but we currently don't have that right now. Community members could contact the city and we could add an email address for that, or we could create a service request type that's related to app feedback. So there are a couple different ways we could do that, and something I've been Reggie and I have also talked about doing that. We have not implemented it yet, though. It's something we're talking about.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple more questions. With regards to, data privacy, I noticed that when I logged in, it automatically geolocated where I was at.
Mhm.
So are they collecting any intellectual property data, like your use of location? Because I know a lot of apps do that. So are they collecting IP information? Reggie?
Yeah, so
I mean,
that's,
yeah,
yeah,
that's something we're going to have to investigate, because it's from what we understand, there's not any storage of that information. I believe just in communicating with the app, there does need to be knowledge of things like IP addresses, but so I can't say for sure that none of that data is available, but I know that they're not, the website isn't, tracking somebody's location. The only time that it's using the location is when you select, take a picture, you pinpoint it on the map, then it identifies that location. In order for that behavior to work, you need to turn on you open up the app to your location services. That's up to the individual. They can choose not to, but if they don't, then they're going to have to navigate to the location rather than have it automatically show up. So there is the flexibility to increase your privacy as an individual if there's concern there. But we'll make sure that we answer this question more robustly in an email response. Yeah. Yeah.
My last question is, there are a lot of folks that are very passionate about certain issues. Let's say feral cats. Can somebody who's very passionate about trying to solve the issue, can they enter reports like 10 times a day? If that's something that they want to receive a quick response on, how do we, check repeated reports of the same person entering multiple entries of the same issue in one day?
Well, thankfully, that hasn't been a huge problem so far, but I think it's technically possible that somebody, gets frustrated and wants to send the same issue 10 times.
We'll have
At this, it'll probably happen. If that happens, staff will deal with it in terms of trying to consolidate the requests into one. And until it becomes a big inefficiency problem, we probably wouldn't put anything in place to prevent that. So, but we'll see how it goes. If it does become a problem, we may have to develop some strategies to consolidate these requests into one.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Okay. And I think my questions are more in the form of comments, so we'll come back to that a little bit later. At this point in time, I'm going to take public comment on this item. So if you are online and would like to comment on this item before we begin our deliberation, please go ahead and raise your hand. And for those of you that are present, how many cards do we have on this topic?
Mr. Mayor, we have 0 cards in person and we have 1 person online.
Okay, let us go to our online commenter, please.
Pat, you may unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just have a question because I've used 311 and this new application I think is much better. It's easier to use, more user friendly. But my concern is that I input them, but they always get closed. But when you go by the location for whatever it is, overgrown or, cars parked on the front lawn in pieces, it says it's closed and resolved, but it's not. Is that something I'll have to take up with the compliance department?
Okay, so we will address that when you're done with public comment. Is there another part of your public comment?
No, that was it.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point in time, I will close public comment. I want to come back to this question about what it means to be resolved, because I know we've had some discussions behind closed doors as we work through the ops issues about the difference between something being resolved in the sense that it's been allocated to PD or if a letter has been issued to someone, hey, what you're doing is contrary to code, you're formally told to stop doing that, and what some of us might consider resolved. So action taken versus the car is off the front lawn or things like that. So I think that the terminology continues to evolve. So I'm going to start with City Manager to see if you'd like to add into that, and then come to Mr. Seiner if you'd like to weigh into that. But I do think that we are refining kind of how we talk about the workflow and the state in the workflow, both from our perspective, but ultimately really for the residents' perspectives, because they're the ones who are making the request.
Thank you, Mayor. This is something that I've been speaking with our executive team members, especially those who will receive requests out of the system. Right now, there are a couple different ways that items are being closed. For example, if a citizen puts in a request of something that's in the code enforcement space, an item may be closed if code enforcement has received the request and maybe has visited the location or cited the location that is not complying with our ordinances, but it may not mean that the issue that the person brought to our attention has been resolved. Sometimes code enforcement issues may take a long time. There's other cases where an issue is brought to our attention and it actually, the problem is fixed. So staff and I are currently working on a better way of closing out items and what exactly does that mean and being able to communicate that back.
Okay, so at this point in time, I'm going to bring it back to council members for any final comments before moving to our next item. Councilmember Aguilar.
Well, thank you. I think this is something that we needed to kind of update and get up to speed with easily reporting issues in our community. I think since I was able to use it, it's easy to navigate, and I think folks would find this as a great app to use and download for any issues that are happening in the city. I think my only concern would be to create policy behind the data privacy and usage and any information that is shared, so that we can also take a look at that and figure out what the community would like shared or not. Privacy is one of the great concerns here. And then pop up for 911 if it's an emergency. I know folks will probably pick that up not thinking I should call 911 rather than report it on the app. So great job. I think this is a exciting app for San Leandro. Thank you, Mike.
Vice Mayor Simon, please.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. Looking forward to the verification side when we get to let people know that work is complete, and would also like to see documentation like a before and after photo. I think would answer so many questions in a quick one picture before, two picture after. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments, I'll offer my quick suggestions or thoughts that are beyond what's already been discussed here. For me personally, the recategorization. I've seen a number of times that I submit something and it's recategorized, and which just begs the question, it seems to be recategorized to something that I can't pick in the app. So I'm not quite sure why that is, but let's save that extra step. If it's public, if it's debris, for instance, and there's a distinction between private and public right of way or something, let's just put it in the app and let people pick, or have it be a menu. So they click that and then it says, is it public right of way or private right of way? As an example, I do think that you probably have broad consensus here on the council just around the notion of privacy. And so whether there's a SOC 2 report for the vendor or other sort of reports, I think would be useful. So maybe next time you come back, you can just have probed with the vendor. And that would include tracking people's location. I mean, I don't think that we would expect that it's tracking people's location, but obviously when people submit, it does default to where they are if location service is on. And that's kind of logical because you don't want it to say, well, let's start in Europe and have you navigate around the map until you get to San Leandro, California, et cetera. So I get the logic of it, but just, perhaps making sure that people are aware and that we understand what sort of tracking is actually happening. The other thing that I wrote here, so privacy in terms of just general consensus direction, privacy, and the second one being reporting, having an understanding of how the reporting is happening out of the back end, coming to us with reports, maybe a quarter, 2 quarters from now to demonstrate what's happening. Looking down Council Row, I don't see any objections to that guidance. So we'll proceed to our next item. So we're going to move to item 3B. And this is a presentation on the Lake Chabot repair status update. And for this item, we've got Public Works Director Sheila Marquises, who's going to be kicking off this presentation.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, members of the public. My name is Sheila Marquises, Public Works Director, and I'm here tonight with your interdepartmental city team to provide you an update on our Lake Chabot Road repairs. So to fully understand how we got to where we are today, I want to take a few minutes to provide a little bit of a background and history of the roadway, walk you through the storm damage that the road experienced in the New Year's Eve storm, and then also to lead you to what we're doing today and our next steps. So starting with the background, Lake Chabot Road is half a mile in the city of San Leandro. About 1.8 miles is located in the county. So that means it's owned and maintained by Alameda County. Pre-COVID in 2018, the road sees about 3,500 vehicles per day. It has a pavement condition index of 39. So note that pavement condition index is below 50 is considered poor, and below 25 is failed. The roadway is about 32 feet wide. Currently, no bike lanes or sidewalks for pedestrians. The road has been unstable due to the geological hazards in the area, but also noting that the road, as shown on the top left map, is located in the fire hazard zone, so that the northern part of the Bay Vista neighborhood is what we consider the fire hazard zone. The top right image is the roadway relative to the Hayward Fault. And then the bottom right map shows the roadway that's located in the landslide zone. It's also surrounded by in a liquefaction zone. We also took some time to look at the history of the roadway. It's shown that it has sustained a lot of damages due to those geological hazards. A scrub of the Oakland Tribune dates back to 1880 when there was a request to repair this roadway to the Board of Supervisors. In a walk-through time, it shows that the road has been reconstructed 3 times in 1927, in 1933, and last in 1965. Also in 1966, there was an effort to study how to bypass the road and looked at 3 options, as you can see in the middle image. They explored 3 options, A, B, and C, shown by the dashed lines, and eventually landed with moving forward with option A, which is a new road, which was now called today as Fairmont Drive. So in 1973, Fairmont Drive opened to provide Castro Valley residents a direct link to MacArthur Freeway and the Bayfair BART station. We also have a history of repairs in the roadway. First, we have a reference to a 1977 slide and repair. I don't have any photo for that repair. However, we do have an image shown from an upslope repair in 1998, likely due to the El Nino storms that year. And you could see in the roadway today, there's about 2,000 linear feet of roadway that's showing signs of settlement, or also known as creep. It's shown by the cracks in the roadway. The city maintenance team has been diligently trying to seal and fill these cracks. However, they continue to grow in the roadway. So I wanted to note these are updated slides. I wanted to add additional photos that before the New Year storms, we were monitoring 3 areas of the roadway. The first is the top right, number 1 is what we call the downslope slide today. And then erosion at location 2, shown by the 2 pictures. It's actually a longer area. So I put the 2 photos together. And then the bottom photo is what we call the monitoring area 3. And this was from a geology study from about 2018, 2019. And that leads us to the New Year's Eve storm damage. I want to note that between the week of December 26, 2022 and January 15th, 2023 was the wettest 3-week period we have seen since 1849. In the 22-23 rain season alone, there were 3 atmospheric rivers that hit the Bay Area. And then this recent winter, 23 and 24, there were 51 atmospheric rivers. The storm damage to the city on the city's segment were significant at location 1, and a new slide occurred at slide location 4. So at location 1, half of the roadway, the soil under the roadway has been washed out. So half of the roadway is kind of hanging. The photo on the top right shows the guardrail kind of hanging in the midair. And slide 4 was a location that was previously protected, has now washed the rocks onto the roadway. So after those storm damage, city closed the roadway just north of slide 1 there, right below Chabot Terrace, and then right after, or right before, right north of Astor Drive. Just some photos of the storm damage in the county segment. Their damage wasn't as extensive as the city's damage to our roadway. They were able to either just clean or brush up the roadway and the slides. In their segment of Lake Chabot Road is much wider, so they're able to reroute traffic and divert as needed on the roadway. So as soon as those slides occurred, we mobilized our contractor for emergency protection work and temporary repairs using tarping to prevent further erosion. Quick mention on grant application. In 2016, the city submitted a grant application for pre-disaster mitigation. Our application was denied due to the road's low traffic volume, a short detour route, and a short travel time. However, when the road slid, we immediately reached out to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and they redirected us to submit an application to the Federal Highway Administration. And so the rest of 2023 and early 2024, we worked with FHWA to secure a $2 million grant with a required city match. And those were for erosion repair for slides 1 and 4 only. Now that we have the federal government involved, this funding is subject to the National Environmental Policy Act, which means we cannot proceed with any work without a full environmental study to make sure that our proposed work is not a impact to the surrounding and environment. Which brings us to the repairs today. So today the road is open to emergency vehicle access. We worked with our police department and fire department to come up with a design that would allow emergency vehicles and any evacuation needed for the roadway. So the design that you see with the red bollards and the fencing, we worked together and note that this has been applied in other communities for similar uses. In the photo, the top right photo shows one of our fire vehicles actually accessing the roadway. We also wanted to make sure that all the other access to the Bay Vista neighborhood was clear of any construction or any obstruction during this time. Also, this is an updated slide with the photos that I shared earlier. I wanted to give a sense of how much we're spending to repair slides 1 and 4. We're at about $3 million, including the grant. And these are estimates that we're projecting before the environmental studies are completed. So we are working on repairing slides 1 and 4. but I also note that we still have the erosion at slides 2 and 3, which are the photos in the top right. And I wanted to just provide a simple drawing showing the slides relative to each other because it's not obvious to the naked eye when you go out there and look at the roadway. You don't see this erosion below the roadway. So the next steps, we are in September, we're nearing wet season. So wet season is October 15th for the city. And what that usually means is we halt all construction operations, which includes any movement of soil. That reduces the risk of erosion and landslides. And so this is the time when we start protecting our hillsides and our projects. We do have an environmental consultant on board just before summer break. We awarded that contract, so we will start mobilizing that team. And as soon as we get those studies completed, that would feed into the proper design of those slides, slides 1 and 4. Construction, when we have an environmental study, we're by the creek. Construction is always limited to the summertime, so we don't anticipate construction until about summer of 2026. So at this time, we're focused on slides 1 and 4, and protecting the hillside for any winter storms. And that concludes my presentation. I'm also here with our police and fire teams and also our risk manager, Megan Stevens.
Thank you. So at this point in time, we'll take clarifying questions that you might think that the public might have, so that we can then go to our public comment, get their input, and come back for our discussion of what we have heard. I'll begin with Councilmember Baloo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sheila, for that presentation, that update. I just really only have 2 questions that I think would be germane. I know some of my other colleagues will probably have more just closer to their district, but there's been quite a bit of communication on this by our public. And and to be frank, I won't even be on the council when the decision is made, I'm sure, because it's going to be long after December, given what you just told us. My first question is, there's been a lot of emails that have included something like AB 747 or SB 47 and AB 99 or SB 99 or something like that. Is the city in compliance with those 2 pieces of legislation?
So I think you're talking about the safety element general plan requirement. So we did a study with Kittleson and Associates to review those 2 different requirements. And then right now we're actually working on our local hazard mitigation plan, which is what the general plan points at, which is like a very large scale risk assessment. So we are in compliance and we're actually going to be kicking that off, and there'll be a lot of good community feedback for that plan as well.
You say we are in compliance.
Yes, we are.
That's being run out of the risk management office, or?
It's multiple departments. So the general plan is not risk management. Obviously, our community development team did the Kittleson and Associates program and started that to put us in compliance, but the local hazard mitigation plan also puts us in compliance.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to step in there because compliance is a legal matter. And so I'm going to ask city attorney to weigh in because a statement about compliance is a legal determination.
Thank you, Mayor. So reading this, the statute or the legislation, we are in compliance. We need to complete the plans as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And my second question is, Lake Chabot, this part of Lake Chabot Road is closed right now. How many evacuation routes are there out of Bay Vista?
As shown on the slide, we counted about 9. Nine locations. Those are 9 access into the neighborhood.
I'm more concerned about out of the neighborhood than into the neighborhood there.
And
I think the neighbors are concerned about into the neighborhood at this point, but judging from some of the emails, but so the evacuation, there's 9 evacuation routes out currently.
there are 9 entry and exit points.
Those are my questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
At this point in time, I'll go to Councilmember Bowen, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Given so much of the feedback that we've been receiving, I just want to confirm, and maybe that the fire chief can weigh in on this, but I really want to speak to the concerns around if there were a wildfire and the capacity to be able to address evacuation. We have, from the picture here, we obviously can access the road. Can you speak more to that?
Sure. Good evening, and thank you for having me. So we've worked with Public Works on the emergency access component. So as you see in the picture, we do have access in and out of that location. So you could access out of this if there was a time or need to actually get out, and you could go over those bollards to get out. So we do feel confident that we could get our apparatus into that location for a fire, and while safely allowing people to get out.
So can you clarify, you say when you can get out, not just an emergency vehicle, but vehicles of residents that are there? If there was a wildfire, they would be able to take that road out?
Well, it's hard to predict exactly where the wildfire may or may not be, but looking at the red zone that I think Sheila showed up on the screen, there definitely is an impact, and we definitely appreciate that potential. So there is multiple ways to get out of this location as seen, and a resort, you could come down Lake Chabot and then access out through this location that you see in that picture.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. For clarification, Sheila, can you go to that timeline slide? So if I'm understanding this correctly, on October 15th, we halt any work on the road to protect in case of erosion.
We would start tarping the hillside.
Got it. And the environmental studies will continue in the fall. The design process is specifically for slides 1 and 4 only.
Correct.
And then construction of 2026 is just for slides 1 and 4.
Correct.
Okay. And is this timeline, and again, we've been doing a lot of infrastructure projects and timelines, and is this a standard? I don't even know if standard would be a good term, but like for example, the bridge in our districts that we are very excited to have also will be constructed in 2026, correct? So is this just because we only have a really short period in spring and summer to do any sort of construction?
Correct. Typically, when we're working in areas like these where there is an opportunity for any impact to the environment in the creek, on the shorelines, the hillsides. Now we're in the middle of in the city, like we were in downtown, we would just mainly be concerned with traffic impacts and disturbing the neighbors. But again, when we're working in the hillsides by the creek and we have the federal government involved, that's when we take it a little bit more slower and detailed to make sure that we're meeting all of their requirements to get reimbursed for the work.
Okay. And in terms of the requirements, what exactly in the grant does it, there's questions around whether or not what condition does the road need to be in once you expend the grants?
So the stipulations of the grant is pretty straightforward in that we're just restoring the pavement, what was damaged. There's no discussion of how, well, that's what you're asking, of how to use the roadway. There isn't any stipulation in the agreement between us and the FHWA. The agreement is to repair the roadway, do your due diligence, and repair it within the reasonable timeline that is set forth for us.
And the environmental studies will be just on slides 1 and 4 and not the whole road?
Correct.
Got it. And while this is happening, would there be an opportunity to imagine what the road could be outside of just slide 1 and 4?
During this time frame, there's an opportunity to have those discussions should council want to have that. At this time, again, staff is focused on repairs of 1 and 4. Also want to note that we are only authorized at the federal government. The work that we would get reimbursed from here on is just for the environmental studies. Outside of that work, that would be at our cost.
At this point in time, I'll go to Councilman Regular, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gonzalez. Thank you, Sheila. My question is with regards to funding our approved capital improvement projects for roads this year. What is that?
We usually spend about $4 million for roadways.
And if we repair this, let's say we have some funding, would that take away from that pot of money?
Repairing of the slides 1 and 4, we have funding for. Now, slides of 2 and 3, that would have to either come from currently a general fund pot, which would eat into those, either the road repair or a different pot of money from the city.
Gotcha. And the grant applications, by us taking the Federal Highway Administration grants, we would have to go through National Environmental Policy Act, which is to conduct a study for all 4?
Just the 2.
Just the 2.
But the studies typically for an environmental study covers a large group or large radius, half a mile, to make sure that there aren't any animals that would be disturbed during the construction or even after.
Let's say, I'm thinking short term here. We open the road. Is that only for one-way traffic? Will there be access for pedestrian path or bike path? What would that look like?
Reopening the road or looking into reopening this roadway to one way, we would have to get a consultant on board to look at if we're talking about a one-way avoiding all 4 slides. Now, it would look like that we would have to take or have that understanding that the road is unstable and that we will be putting loads on this roadway, additional loadway than it has been before. But I also want to caution that there's going to be times during the construction or during the environmental study during the construction that we will have to close the roadway because there's not enough room to allow traffic, to allow bicyclists, and to allow pedestrians. And also reopening the roadway, we would be inviting those pre-COVID traffic volumes back in the roadway. So that's another conflict that we would have to navigate.
If we do open the road, how soon can you said we have to conduct a study? You provided a timeline with fixing these issues here. What would a timeline look at to opening the road to one-way traffic?
Right. So with 1 and 4 repaired, there's an opportunity to open the one-way without having to fix 2 and 3. Again, that's a discussion we can have with you, making sure you're fully aware of all the risks or concerns with slides 2 and 3, the impacts to any evacuation in the case of an emergency, that if we open the one way, then our fire and police department would have to navigate through additional traffic to get up the hill. So there's a lot of give and take in the roadway and bike and peds we would not allow the roadway through a one-way construction.
With regards to funding, is there like, let's say we can't get funding. I mean, we're going to try to get it. Can we implement a special assessment? Bella Vista. Is that an option?
That could be an option. I have to say, we haven't looked that far.
Worst
But
case
we-
scenario, I'm just throwing ideas out there. Just
So before letting you answer that on the spot,
Mhm.
because it does involve tax issues and the like, I would like city attorney to weigh in just from a legal perspective, maybe what some of the constraints are. And she can answer from like an engineering perspective, but from a legal perspective, whatever the fee might be, can you help us understand?
Yes, Mayor. Yes, an assessment district would be a possibility. It does require that an engineer's report that would determine the special assessment or the benefit that is derived to each parcel of property that's affected by the proposed assessment district and the map and the properties that are within that would be subject to the assessment. And they would be, it would be a right for those property owners to vote on the assessment. That's essentially how the assessment district would work. There are a number of acts, the 1901 Act, 1911 Act, that would allow for assessment districts, but depending on what needed to be done. Grading and paving of streets, for example, would be under the earlier 1901 Act. Sidewalks, storm drains, gutters, 1911 Act could be a little bit broader. But essentially, yeah, that's a possibility. It would require an engineer's report, and then the benefited properties would be able to essentially vote.
got it. Thank you for clarifying that, Rich. And then last question, Sheila, you had mentioned that this road is owned and maintained by Alameda County
The 1.8 miles outside of the city
outside,
limits.
but not the road within the city limits. Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Viveros Walton, please.
Thank you. I'm going to group my questions in public safety, then traffic, and then miscellaneous questions. So I'll start off with safety. You mentioned on slide 17 that there are 9 evacuation routes, but let me just. So there are 9 possible ways in and out, but there are really only 3 outlets, right? Estudillo, Benedict heading north and Benedict heading south. But if you head south, you go into Oak Knolls, and to get out of Oak Knolls is almost impossible. So can you just clarify on the safety, what defines a fire exit route? Because I think that the neighborhood perception is that there are not 9 exit routes. There's basically 2, because the Oak Knolls one is really hard to get in and out of.
So I don't know if I can give you an exact terminology of what actually constitutes or is defined as a fire exit route. I think it's one, it has to be safe. It has to be obtainable by a normal flow of vehicles to get out safely. I think that that's probably an important consideration. Then probably actually knowing the potential of how many cars you would anticipate using that access road to get onto a larger sort of road to exit that. So I don't know if there's an actual definition, but that's sort of what I would, view that as when I consider these options.
Thank you. And that feeds into my question regarding the hazard mitigation plan, because I think it would be important to what we define as an exit road, because I think, again, the perception from the community is that they're not 9, but really only 2, because the Oak Knolls one, I would not use that. I would rather walk across the freeway rather than drive up Oak Knolls. So in terms of the hazard mitigation, can you expand on where we are on the process of getting that?
Yeah, so we received a grant last year. And so we put it out for RFP and we have 5 responses. So now we can actually choose our favorite, rank them, and actually commence the project, get a scope of work going, a timeline, and actually get community feedback. which is
Okay.
really essential so that you could actually prioritize that.
So aside from fire, can you tell a little bit more about what kind of hazards the plan will aim to address?
Yeah. So, I mean, besides wildfire, which is going to be escalating, we have storms, flooding, a Chabot Dam failure, a tsunami, inundation. So the liquefaction related to an earthquake. So those are really the main ones. However, in the future, we might see those rearranged just
Right.
depending on the recent history.
Thank you. Okay, those are all the safety questions. I'm gonna transition over to traffic. Can you expand a little bit on what is the latest traffic count? When was it completed? And what did that look like pre and post storm?
So our latest traffic count at various segments, but we're focusing on the intersection of Lake Chabot Road and Astor, where we would assume that's the point of cut through. At the end of August, we counted about 1,400 vehicles at a 24-hour count using that intersection. So about 700 coming in, 700 going out.
And that was at 24-hour period and it was a weekday. Can you repeat the date?
August 29th, that was our latest. August 29th, Thursday.
Thursday. Okay. So that was after school started. Okay. Can you talk a little bit or elaborate on county collaboration on various issues? I know signage has been one of them, discussion of various scenarios. Can you talk a little bit about what county collaboration has looked like with the city in terms of addressing some of the issues that have come up?
So we collaborated with the county on several issues, storm related, in 2023. Some in the creek, some in the canals. But for this location, we coordinated and collaborated the closure for both sides of Lake Chabot Road. Again, with the county being able to clean up their slides much quicker, we tried to make sure that we had enough signage because knowing our road was going to be closed longer. So we worked with the county, obtained an encroachment permit and put up a sign closer to Fairmont Drive to say like Lake Chabot Road is closed ahead. And then we also worked with, not directly the county, but all the mapping ways, Google Maps, to make sure that the closure is reflected in their navigation systems. That was the extent. We also wanted to work with them to see what other deterrent we could implement. But to the extent of the signage, the only encroachment permit we've been able to achieve is the one on Fairmont Drive.
Thank you. And that leads into my next, I have two more questions. This one, the one I'm about to ask, and then one more. And this leads into my other question. Do we know what the origin of the traffic is?
I don't. We don't have that information. We're just counting them. There are studies that could use data, origin and destination data, using Bluetooth. There's technology that comes at a cost. It's another service where we can see origin and destination of cars traveling through a roadway. But for now, we've just put up our own traffic cameras and watched videos. Our interns are watching videos of cars counting, passing through the intersections at various points. So at this point, we're just safely assuming that they're not San Leandro residents.
Yeah, I think that's why I bring up the county collaboration, right? Because it's non-San Leandro traffic traversing through a neighborhood. And we'll talk a little bit about later in the comments around the condition of Astor and View and how it's deteriorated, but I'll save that for my comments. My last question, thank you, Councilmember Aguilar, for bringing up the timeline, but I'd like to ask about the cost, for an approximate cost for an alternating one-way if we were to open that.
So in early 2023, when we consulted with a traffic engineering company, they had given us an estimate of $250,000 to implement one-way traffic control around slide 1. Slide 1 was our major concern then. We were confident or that we could deal with one slide at a time. And that was the most narrow part of Lake Chabot Road. And so we were given a quote that would cost about $250,000 for the small closure.
Thank you. I'll save my rest for comments.
Councilmember Azevedo, please.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Most of my questions got answered. And I want to thank the community for coming out, for everybody for organizing and being passionate. And thank you for showing me the road. Most of my questions, like I said, got answered. So how safe is the road to open right now? Do we know, how long does it take for the environmental study to find?
Environmental study, we anticipate it'll be a couple of months. Again, there's been several studies in the area already due to the development that they can refer to, but we do want to typically give them a few months to conduct their study. There may be challenges involving the season, the rain season that we're coming up, and how thorough they can complete that work. But as far as the roadway itself, as I indicated, there's 4 risks associated with the roadway. Of most concern is slide 1, where half of the roadway is washed out.
And my last question is about those ballers. They seem kind of high. Are cars able to go over those without messing up their cars in case of emergency, or are they just for basically emergency vehicles?
They are flexible. They're a unique kind, different than the ones you'd see in the roadway. But they are spring loaded. But
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
At this point in time, Councilmember Bowen, you've gone one time, right? Okay, so I'm going to get to Vice Mayor online.
Thank you. Follow-up question on the access routes. Do you have a map that you can show? I don't know if your slides can illustrate this, but where are these 9 routes? Can you show that now on a map?
Councilmember Simon, we can't simultaneously have you speaking and have the presentation showing at the same time.
Okay, if I'm quiet, can you show it?
Unfortunately, no, I can pull it up, but then I have to mute you because we can't do both at the same time because it shares the same input.
Okay, I'm fine. Mute it. If they could show the 9 routes, I think that would be appreciated.
Okay.
I'll mute.
Presentation again.
So Councilmember Simon, it is being shown. I don't know if you can see it on your computer, but it is being shown here in this room. In order to be able to hear your question, we will now proceed to take it down so that we can actually hear your question.
Thank you. Yes, I could see it. I could see it a few moments ago. But my question is, can you illustrate where those 9 emergency access routes are with your arrow, something just pointing where they are?
So just for the benefit of those in the room who did see the map, they were numbered, and that's where the green arrows are on the map. And they are identified as the exit points that either touch Benedict Drive or Lake Chabot Road. So each street that hits one of those appears to be defined as an exit route to the extent that they come high up off the hill. So it doesn't include, for instance, Gabriel Court or some of those very small streets. It's like, how would you get out of the top of Bay Vista?
So they funnel into Benedict Road?
Correct. Benedict and Lake Chabot Road. And Estadio, to be precise, where Lake Chabot Road turns into Estadio.
Okay, so if they funnel into Benedict Road, there could be a bottleneck there. So essentially it wouldn't be 12 or how many they said 9. If there were a problem at on Benedict. Benedict seems like the key artery.
Is there a question for Director Marquisas? Maybe let me just reframe to make sure I'm understanding. Are you asking her whether Benedict is the primary collector for the folks exiting off of the hillside heading due west?
Yeah, my question is, if Benedict is a common route path for each one of those alternatives, are there really 9 alternatives since they all funnel down Benedict?
Correct. There's 9 entry and exit points that's shown on the map. Majority of those on the west side of the community does funnel on Benedict, and another 3 exits on SDO.
Okay, I'll probably have some more comments on that later. Question would be, next question is on the number of repairs that you have. 2 repairs, 1 and 4. And looking at the timeline of funding, so you asked for money on those in 2016 and no money was provided?
That's correct. In 2016, with the known 3 areas of concern, we did submit a grant and it was denied.
So it took for them to fail in order for you to get money?
Correct.
And the cost to fix them when they have failed, is that more expensive than if you would have fixed them when they were not failed?
When we submitted the application, it was for 3 slides. And so the grant was for the 2, slide 1, and then slide 4. So slightly different situation.
But I mean, just from an engineering construction perspective, is it cheaper to fix things before they break?
Yes, typically.
Okay, that's a concern, not from the city standpoint, but just how we get our money. Why do we have to wait for things to fail to fix them if they're more expensive when they fail? That's a big concern to share with our federal reps. For us to be proactive is much more cost effective. And it seems like we were ignored when we tried to do that. That is a concern. But so another question would be seniors. I understand a lot of seniors live in the hills up there in Bayo Vista, and we are working to become an age-friendly city. And there's an age-friendly initiative now being developed. Have we taken into account senior driving? If there's any other special needs for senior driving, nighttime access, things like that, steep hill, steep terrain from an emergency access or emergency evacuation standpoint?
Councilmember Sawyer, I'll have to ask to rephrase the question of the seniors, unless Mayor, if
So I'm gonna try to reframe it because I think I know where he's coming from. So let's just see if we can be efficient. We say that we're an age-friendly city. We adopted an age-friendly city plan. So was that a consideration, or is that currently a consideration in how we're evaluating what actions to take with respect to the road?
actions that we've taken did not consider the age-friendly plan directly. The actions we've taken were for emergency purposes for the structural integrity of the roadway.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, another question is environmental benefits. And I guess your environmental study would probably look at this, but right now, do you know, are there environmental benefits, cleaner air, whatever environmental benefits we can come up with of closing the road versus opening the road? Have you considered or evaluated those?
We have not done a formal evaluation of that type of assessment.
Would that happen during the EIR?
The EIR doesn't exactly come into play at the moment. The project that we have is to repair the roadway. Now, we do have an environmental consultant, but that's just looking at the impact to the environment. But depending on the recommendation of the consultant that leads into the design, and that's when we evaluate any other major significant impacts to the community.
Okay, but as far as big picture pros and cons versus opening and closing the road in the environment, because a lot of people are interested in a bike path or keeping it natural, as opposed to opening the road. Have we done any type of pros and cons comparison from a city perspective on that?
We have not gone to that part of the discussion, and we've been focused on stabilizing and securing the roadway. Mainly focusing again on slides 1 and 4.
So Councilmember Simon, I'm going to come back to you in just a few minutes. I'm going to try to just kind of keep this moving along for the second round of questions. I've been a little bit liberal on letting people go past their 5 minutes. I think it's okay because we're in a good cadence. I don't see any frustration, but I am going to come back to Councilmember Bowen.
Thank you, Mayor. A few points of clarification, especially from some of the other council members' questions. We said we have about $4 million a year of road work in our, correct, Sheila? And the city of San Leandro has a PCI of 51, correct? Or 52, and Oakland might be 51. I think we're slightly better than Oakland.
59.
59?
So we were at 55
Ooh.
at the end of 2022. We are now at 59.
Got it. And so I just want to understand for context in the city in terms of our general pavement quality and the fact that this is a very serious issue across the city. I'm seeing those pictures are incredibly difficult, and imagine constantly having to fix that. And you obviously want to be able to have a road that is safe and throughout the entire city. How much would it, no, I'll save that question for later. Compared to other roads, you said 1,400 was the last count for August 29th. I live on a very busy street. I think it's almost 1,000 more cars than that a day on my street. But what is that number relative to other streets?
So, for example, Durant Avenue is 2,400 vehicles per day. Dolores Avenue's 3,250 vehicles. Broadmoor, 2,100. Lewis Avenue, 895. And if you wanted like a larger number comparative to like major streets, I would say, say Bancroft Avenue from Durant to Dutton, 9,800.
Could you repeat that number, please?
Bancroft from Durant to Dutton, these are older counts, 9,800.
From Durant to Bancroft, so like that 4 blocks is
So
like
Bancroft.
9,000 cars.
9,000.
Wow. Okay. When I get a lot of emails, I think a lot of council members do related to traffic mitigation. If there clearly there's increased traffic, there's decreased traffic on Lake Chabot Road, but there's increased traffic in the community. Would there be? It would be a separate conversation, but possible traffic mitigation for the community. I know when I get these emails, the process that I send them through in terms of talking to staff about what's possible. I think that it might be worthwhile to at least have that conversation to relieve some of that while we're going through this process with the environmental study. I don't know what that would look like. Obviously, it's a different topography than my community. And then in terms of funding for the slide repairs of 2 and 3, in the past, we've not been able to get grant funding for it. Could you speak to what is the criteria for many of these grants? Like, how can we think about getting funding to repair 2 and 3?
So the success of our grant application also depends on what other communities we're competing with. And typically, to be competitive for any grant opportunities, we have master plans or documents that indicate that this road is of the highest priority and has been voted and agreed upon by council in the community. But as far as evacuation, emergency access routes, the priority factor scorings, in its reference in the Kittleson study, are the hazards that are within that roadway, the capacity, if the roadway is currently at capacity, or there's significant backup and queues on that road, vulnerable developments, meaning there's very limited access to that area, critical facilities, if you can have more than one school or a public building, and equity, underserved communities that's identified by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and also the detour time and distance for the roadway.
And you referenced the Kittleson report, we did one for we have one for the city of San Leandro, and Alameda County also had Kittleson do their assessment. On both of those, is trying to understand Lake Chabot Road, if I'm clear, is not an evacuation route based on those reports.
The county's report went as far as prioritizing their roadways. Lake Chabot was not one of the top 10 in their study.
Oh, not in the Kittleson report, but in our previous local hazard mitigation plan, it was categorized in the top 5. So it was number 3, I think, in the top 5 of the local hazard mitigation plan focuses. But I'd have to go look back and see what it was in the Kittleson report.
And when we look at ways to mitigate, I'm sorry, I'm going over time, just one last question. In terms of trying to mitigate that risk and understanding that there's bottlenecks elsewhere, would the interpretation of the risks be part of that to try to expand the roadways like along Estadio or Bancroft, so that, I'm just making stuff up, just you're the expert, not me, just so that there is not a bottleneck or there's other access point. Is that part of what mitigation looks like? I'm not, yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think there's any recommendations on like widening roads or anything specific like that. It's just maintenance.
That's my time. I'll go to Councilmember Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Three points, 3 questions. I want to go back to that thing about escape routes for just a second. So if we decide we have to do an evacuation, probably going to rely on your expertise, Eric, because you probably have a lot more experience on this than most in the room. Let's say we land on people are evacuating down Benedict. Would there be a plan to split Benedict one way in each direction, 2 lanes, as opposed to a 2-way street? Same thing with Estudillo. Is that done in evaluations where they have a one-way out, nobody in kind of thing?
So we have a pre-planned sort of computer system that we could use to advise for evacuation zones. It's called Zone Haven. And so those individuals that live in that area have maps that are identified to safely exit in normal sort of capacity of an emergency component. I think, the one thing that I don't think me or you could predict is what happens in a real emergency when people sort of panic and don't really know the flow, and there's a sense of urgency. And I think that that's probably the unknown that I can't predict. But when you actually get down to Benedict Avenue, I haven't been on it in a little bit, but it is a little bit of a wider road than most roads, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to bottleneck. And the assumption is that they could either get up to Estadio or head down towards Grant to the overpass to get out of that area. But again, the wild card is you just don't know what's going to happen when people have emotions and really are not necessarily mindful of the plan.
Which feeds into my second or follow-up question to that, which is there a way, can we look at other incidents when things have happened to, Nick, when this comes back to the council, is there a way to present to the decision makers? Because this seems to be a big thing of angst of the people living up there, and I can't blame them, to look at models. Can we get a demographic report? Who lives there, number of senior citizens, number of other family members, because we should know most of that. A demographic report on cars. You know, it's usually like if I'm going to the store, we might pile into one car. If it's an evacuation, I think there might be, you know, every car's leaving because they don't want the cars to burn up or, you know, whatever. Can the council get that in the future so they can make a more informed decision about whether this really is something that should be concerned? Or are there no models available? Unfortunately, the 20 years last wildfires, I'm thinking there might be some things we could look at.
Sorry, could you repeat the?
Yeah, is there going to be, when it comes back to councilors, is there a way to get a demographic report of who actually lives in Bay Vista, what the needs might be, and a plan if there had to be an evacuation? Would it take 30 minutes? Would it take 45? Would it take an hour? I mean, are there models that we can look at that can give the policymakers some sense of, is it worth spending $11 million to repair this road?
I could probably speak on the modeling behavior. I can't necessarily speak on the population density or sort of the cars, but we could definitely put in Zone Haven the opportunity to see what, I believe you can pre-program, say 1 house equals 4 residents, and as a base layer, and predict what that car anticipation flow would look like at a given time. Now, again, that's in a very sort of computer generated atmosphere that doesn't account for it. As far as the resident component, I think I'd have to lean on to other avenues to get that information.
It's all good until you can't find the family dog.
Yeah.
Second question is probably for Sheila. If the city decided to change the closure, so instead of being north of Bay Vista Swim and Tennis Club, it was south of Astor, would that alleviate many of the complaints that we're getting from residents saying everybody's driving through their neighborhood?
Can I clarify the question? If there was a full closure of Lake Chabot Road south of Astor?
Not necessarily a full closure, but just where the city limit is. So it would be south of the Bay of Vista, it'd be south of Astor Drive. Yeah.
Full closure? Sorry.
Just, I mean, closure like it is now. So you have that cone up there representing the closure at north of Astor. If they moved that closure, that fence and those bollards to south of Astor Drive, would that eliminate the complaints of everybody saying, I've got 100 cars going 100 miles an hour down View Drive?
This same fencing was just south with the same signs, same bollards. That would mean that there would be no through traffic, no passenger vehicles. It would just be emergency vehicles. And assuming full compliance, that would remove a majority of.
Okay. The last question, I apologize, Mr. Mayor, but it will be quick. I remember when this came to council before about repairing the road and that we had just got all the encroachment permits we needed, right? So there was East Bay Regional Parks was part of where we were going to have to go. We had to go on their land to fix the property. Are there other infrastructure things going on under this road? East Bay Mud, would they have to be a positive player? Would they have to commit to spending some money on redoing pipes or PG&E or East Bay Regional Parks, or have we even looked into that yet? Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I think that my questions are really comments. So what I'd like to do is hear from the public. And to the extent that I need to ask a question during the comment, I'll take that liberty. Let's hear from our public. So I understand from City Clerk that I've got 38 cards.
Yes, we have 36 cards and 1 hand up online.
Okay. So what I'd like to do with my public is I'd like to get some sense of how long you want to talk, because we're willing to be here all night, but I think a lot of you don't want to be here all night. And so the question is, if I give you a minute with some liberty to, about a minute and a half, and I'll be watching that, do you think that we can convey the feelings that we have to convey within 60 to 90 seconds? Okay, just reading the room, I'm hearing a yes. And so I know that the city clerk finds it a little challenging when I say 90 seconds because our timer are in minute increments. But we're gonna play it by ear and hope that people behave and all that kind of good stuff. You've been incredibly patient. You've been very, very respectful, and I'm grateful for that. So now let's move into our time where we get to hear your concerns. We're going to begin in the room, and we will, just to try to speed it up, I'm going to ask you to try to listen to the names that she calls, and let's try to get 4 or 5 people lined up against the wall so we can, I wish we had 2 mics. We don't have 2 mics. So let's get the first 5 lined up.
And Mr. Mayor, what I can do is I can start the timer at 1 minute, and then at 30 seconds, I can reset it to 1 minute.
That's awesome. Thank you for your cleverness.
Okay, so I have Thashia Nadeau, Stephen Cassidy, Peggy Fisher, Terry Schlesinger, and Steve Mack.
Good evening. My name is Tashia Naidu, and I have lived in Bay Vista for over 22 years. I'm respectfully urging the city to take steps to reimagine the use of Lake Chabot Road and not to revert to the status quo before the storm damage. Bay Vista does not speak as a unified voice as to the future of Lake Chabot Road. The views of the association and other voices launching a pressure campaign on the city to reopen the road do not reflect the views of all of Bay Vista residents. Despite ongoing fear-mongering, which I'm hearing in the back right now currently, the reality is that the city has already taken steps to address fire safety and evacuation concerns. And in that regard, I'd like to thank our city officials, the fire department, the public works department for taking prompt action to respond to those concerns. Those movable bollards, I've actually witnessed multiple vehicles go through, including private vehicles who ignored the road signs. So those vehicles can drive through with ease. There are also multiple points of egress, as Ms. Marquise has indicated. And Lake Chabot Road was not identified as a list of priority roadways for improvements in the Kittleson report. The overall cost to the city to fix one stretch of road for the convenience of some is a disproportionate use of city funds and would be at the expense of other crucial infrastructure projects that benefit San Leandro as a whole.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Okay, I just want to say the time is now to reimagine the road into.
Thank you. Stephen Cassidy?
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to emphasize a couple points. First of all, you 7 are the decision makers. Nothing is the way it is unless you make that decision. So you get a budget from staff that has $4 million for the roads. That doesn't mean that that's all you have. That's the staff recommendation. It's a political decision by you as to how much you actually spend. When I was mayor, we had 0 in the budget to help save San Leandro Hospital. We had a meeting, and at the end of the meeting, the number in the budget was $3 million, and we saved the hospital. You have the power to make the decisions to guide this community. If you have $4 million in the budget for the roads, that's not set in stone. Earlier this year, you had $9 million left over from your fiscal year 2022, and you spent that for all different purposes. You could have allocated all to the roads. So the amount of money you have on the roads could have been $13 million. Again, if you want to solve this problem, you have the power to do so. But 4 of you have to make the commitment and the clear direction to staff at a minimum as to what you want to do. And, my request to you tonight is for 4 of you to, at the end of this hearing, state on the record that you're directing the city manager to
Thank you. Your time is
take
up.
into action the plans to reopen the road to vehicle traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy Fisher? Harry Schlesinger? Steve Mack? Gwen Olson? and Ann Kaywood.
Good evening. I'm Peggy Fisher. I live in Bay Vista on Lake Chabot Terrace, and I'm also a member of the Bay Vista Association. We are one neighborhood, and we all care about fire safety. I want to thank the city for addressing our fire concerns by opening the gates on Lake Chabot Road to emergency vehicles. The city has repeatedly confirmed that the safety risks associated with opening the road are significant and should not be ignored. It appears the Reopen Lake Chabot Road petition is a well-funded campaign, pressuring the city to ignore the reality, the current condition of a severely damaged road for their convenience. It feels like a vanity project to me. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Terry Schlesinger, Steve Mack, Gwen Olson, Ann Kaywood, and Peter Van Oosting.
My name is Terry Schlesinger. Thank you for listening. I live in Bay Vista. Open Lake Chabot Road now with alternating one-way traffic and lights at either end. There are 3,500 residents in my neighborhood. This includes the elderly, disabled, and children. 3,500 residents versus a 2,100-foot road. A bike and pedestrian 2,100-foot road is not needed and cannot supersede the public safety of 3,500 residents. All of us are at risk for the speeding on our streets. Alternating one-way traffic on Lake Chabot Road now would reduce this dangerous traffic. Open it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Mack, Gwen Olson, Ann Kaywood, Peter Van Oosting, and Marianne Miller.
Good evening. My name is Gwen. I'm a senior citizen and my disabled brother lives with me. I have lived in Bay Vista near Lake Chabot Road nearly 30 years and in the immediate area near Lake Chabot Road for well over 50. I would first like to thank the city for addressing fire concerns by opening the gates and installing collapsible bollards for emergency use. This emergency roadway access has been used recently by ambulances, fire and police vehicles, as well as tree trimming trucks. In an emergency, residents can also be notified that they can drive through them to evacuate. I would like to reiterate that the Bay Vista community does not speak with a unified voice on the matter of reopening Lake Chabot Road. It needs to be emphasized that the probably outdated $11.5 million estimated repair cost does not include areas previously identified as in danger of failing. Fixing the glaringly obvious major danger does not guarantee the rain this winter or next will not further wipe out another part of this fragile stretch of road, causing it to be closed once again. There are currently 2 unrepaired water leaks caused by unauthorized tree trimming vehicles. We would be paying a very expensive repair whack-a-mole game to benefit a tiny portion of San Leandro. And there's also occasionally an 18-wheeler going down that road, and there's nothing to prevent that. There is a loud and well-funded campaign of fear-mongering attempting to pressure the city to ignore the reality of this road's current condition and to open the road for their convenience, not as they claim safety. If they were actually concerned about fire and flood safety, they would be satisfied with the steps the city has taken to place the collapsible bollards. The sad reality is that they just don't want the traffic on their community streets, which is probably mostly local. Let's imagine it as a park and use the money.
Your time is up. Steve Mack, Ann Kaywood, Peter Van Oosting, Marianne Miller, and Tonde Smith.
Good evening. I want to thank the city council, the mayor, city manager for letting people get up and speak. And obviously those that want to continue the close are outnumbered. And it really comes down to, there's a fact sheet out, myth versus facts. I don't mind the people that want to have it opened. I understand why they don't want 1 car, 20 cars, or 50 cars going on the streets that they didn't have to deal with before. But so they got you all off on evacuation. If there's fire, it's going to come from the park. I live on the corner of Lake Chabot Terrace and Lake Chabot Road. I've lived in San Leandro, hard to believe, 50 years. I've been on that roadway. This has been a continuing problem. It is not safe. Forget the signs. Once they hit the quarry to go down the hill, they end up going 50 miles an hour. And I have had 2 cars crash into my yard coming down the hill. One took out the telephone pole and all, and it's bizarre, but it's not going to change it. And this goes back when Mayor Karp was first trying to address this. Unless the speed limit is, I mean, if you're going to open something, open the whole roadway. But have you considered, we're sitting on the Hayward Fault. What happened in the washout is because climate change. There's no guarantee that we aren't going to have massive water and wash away the roadway again.
Thank you. Your time is
Oh
up.
God, the one on the hill stays there. Don't be misled.
Ann Kaywood, Peter Van Oosting, Mary Ann Miller, Tonde Smith, Brad Jones.
Thank you very much for holding this session. I live in Bay Vista, the city's only neighborhood classified as very high fire risk by CAL FIRE. We are entering the high fire season, and I want to urge you to open Lake Chabot Road to alternating one-way traffic now. According to the city's own 2022 hazard mitigation study, the wildfire model indicates substantial and immediate dangerous congestion for evacuation routes in Bay Vista in the event of a wildfire, specifically on Vista Grand and Benedict. That report was done before Lake Chabot Road was closed, so conditions are now worse. We have a large vulnerable population of older seniors, disabled adults, non-English speakers, and families with very small children. All will need extra time fleeing to safety. Gates with bollards are not the answer. Please agendize it as an urgency item and reopen Lake Chabot Road to alternating one-way traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Van Oosting, Mary Ann Miller, Tonde Smith, Brad Jones, and Tony Schull.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Peter Van Oosting. I live in Bay Vista and on Lake Chabot Road. I've lived there for more than 20 years. As obvious to the council, there's a split of opinion in Bay Vista about what to do with the future of Lake Chabot Road. I personally believe that it should be repurposed. Doesn't make sense to me to continue to pour money into a road that this half-mile stretch of road is surely one of the most expensive and problematic in the entire city. But what concerns me most is a pressure campaign to get the city to reopen the road immediately, ignoring the reality of the situation. As city officials have said repeatedly, publicly, and clearly, including tonight, the road in its current condition is not safe for vehicle traffic. And so, if there was a pressure campaign and all of a sudden the city were to reverse course and reopen the road, despite saying that it is not safe for vehicle traffic, that would be dangerous and irresponsible and also open the city up to enormous liability. I think that we ought to have a debate about the future of Lake Chabot Road. I think that we will. We'll have many opportunities, but mounting a pressure campaign to ignore reality is not a productive use of our time.
Thank you. Mary Ann Miller, Tonde Smith, Brad Jones, Tony Schull, and Carlos Reynoso.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Mary Ann Miller, Bay Vista resident. I also just want to speak to you tonight as a former City of San Leandro planner and focus specifically on the San Leandro 2035 General Plan, the General Plan EIR, and CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. Because the road has been closed now for 20 months, I believe that essentially what has happened is a de facto reclassification of the city's transportation network. Lake Chabot Road on the general plan is designated as a collector, and that carries with it certain speeds and capacities of traffic. Those trips those truck traffic and automobile traffic trips are now going on to what are designated as local streets according to the general plan. So a complete reclassification has essentially been conducted. Also, I want to point out that the closure could be constituted as a project under CEQA. I think it's something that staff should look at and perhaps conduct an initial study for the CEQA guidelines and look at traffic impacts, noise impacts, environmental hazards, and air quality. Staff could then also look at appropriate mitigation measures and project alternatives, such as opening Lake Chabot Road to alternating one-way traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Tonde Smith, Brad Jones, Tony Scholl, Carlos Reynoso, and David Sampson.
Good evening, council, staff, first responders, and my neighbors. It's a pleasure to be here to speak to you on behalf of the coalition that wants to reopen Lake Chabot Road. My name is Tondi Smith, and I live in Bayo Vista. There is nothing between my house and the Fairmont Ridge except dry grass. In the event of a fire, the quickest way for me to escape and leave the area is on Lake Chabot Road. So I ask you to please open Lake Chabot Road immediately to one-way alternating traffic, albeit temporarily, while we work on getting the money to fix it permanently. I have watched Lake Chabot Road because I have a little dog who likes to walk. And so I'm back there and we take the shortcut of using Lake Chabot Road to get to the park. And so I've watched what's been going on, and there were temporary bollards, and then they were removed, and then permanent signs were placed that clearly indicated that there was some thought about opening this road to traffic. There were permanent signs placed there, so I thought that it was going to open. And when it didn't open, we kind of wondered about that. And then our coalition did a public records request, and in that public records request, we learned that in November of 2023, the city was actually planning to open that road. They were involved in with a contractor that was doing
Thank
traffic
you.
safety.
Your time is up.
So please, we encourage you to open the road temporarily to one-way alternating
Brad
traffic.
Jones, Tony Scholl, Carlos Reynoso, David Sampson, and Payal Vora.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Brad Jones. I live on the corner of Astor Drive and Lake Chabot Road. I feel like I am one of the arguably most affected residents of this closure. I am asking the city to address some other issues, such as sideshows, the racing that continues on Lake Chabot Road, the spin outs, the lawlessness that occurs in front of my house on a nightly basis. I believe that traffic mitigation should be the number one priority, with ways to curb speeders, exhibitionists, and whatnot, and deter them from going into the neighborhood of Bayo Vista, and also to deter that activity in front of my house. I am open to all measures to make the neighborhoods more safe, a better quality of life, and happiness for everybody in this room. But most importantly, the lawlessness needs to stop. And I'm working with Sergeant Gill with San Leandro Police to stop that. And I encourage everyone here to help, because I need help. I need sleep and I need sanity. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Scholl, Carlos Reynoso, David Sampson, Payal Vora, and Angela Apple.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am Tony Scholl, and I'm a young 66 resident of the Bayo Vista. Now, in regards to traffic rerouting detours through the Bayo Vista area, it is rapidly becoming known as the Tesla Speedway. At least 80% of those 1,400 cars now go down View Drive, a street which frankly does not compare with Bancroft or any of the others listed in the presentation due to its narrowness and its turns and its stops. After doing the closure, we did an informal count on our street over a period of a few weeks. Cars went per hour during business hours from 5 to 7 to 38 to 51. This is during commute times. It creates safety hazards. Closing the road will not lessen traffic. It merely shoves it elsewhere that was never designed for it. Lake Chabot was designed as an artery. View Drive and the corresponding other streets with View in their names were designed for residents only. I know it sounds elitist, but you cannot argue with the math, you cannot argue with the size, and you cannot argue with the traffic that is now flowing through this. It is not going to make it more environmentally safe to close the road. Again, you're merely transporting whatever environmental impact 2 streets over. I guess if you don't see it, then it doesn't exist. Closure of Lake Chabot Road is a safety issue. Opening it to one-way traffic is going to be somewhat of an improvement. As it stands now, View Drive has become the de facto version of Lake Chabot Road, which is unsafe, unwise, and unsustainable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Carlos Reynoso, David Sampson, Hey Alvora, Angela Apple, and Paul Wellenkamp.
Good evening. My name is Carlos Reynoso, and I live on Marine View Drive in Bayo Vista. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. Now, my wife and I moved to Bayo Vista thinking we were going to get a quieter, safer neighborhood. And after this landslide that we had and the road closure, what we received is a freeway passing before us in front of our home and break-ins. People have been detoured into our neighborhood. They've discovered Bayo Vista, and look what we have to steal from. And unfortunately, one night we had probably about 11 vehicles broken into right by us. I mean, let's face it, we paid good money to be in this neighborhood. We need to do something about it. We need to reroute the traffic back down the street and keep that street open so that we can do what we have to do. I mean, whether it's one-way lane opening right now or closure of the street, we have to do something temporarily until we find a true fix. And then we can all agree upon that fix and reopen the street, because I do want that street reopened. As they have said, it's an artery that we need open. So I thank you.
Thank you. David Sampson, Hey Alvora, Angela Apple, Paul Wellenkamp, and Greg Novak.
I thank you for the time to speak. I'm David Sampson. I live on View Drive between Astor and Graff. I'm wearing my walking outfit tonight because this is what I have to wear when I go out for a walk now, because the additional traffic on from Lake Chabot Road has made it to the point where I don't feel safe walking down the street. We have more cars going faster, and the residential street, especially View, is narrower than most of the other streets in Bayo Vista, especially the newer area. So I feel that we need to do something, and I am open to the suggestion of doing one-way traffic, or if we can't open the road completely, then shutting the road down completely so that we do not have that additional traffic going through Bayo Vista. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey Alvora, Angela Apple, Paul Wellenkamp, Greg Novak, and He Wu. Hey Alvora. Can you use the microphone?
Is this better?
Yes.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak and listening to our concerns. I am Payal Vora. I live actually right next to the top end of the closed section of Lake Chabot Road. I urgently would request that the road be open to one-way alternating traffic in order to mitigate the increasing safety and security concerns that are only going to get worse. Since the road has closed, it is a dead zone, and there is at least one person who lives there. And he lives on the Chabot side of the road and emerges from the shrubbery quite unexpectedly. And any bikers or walkers encounter him, and regardless of not commenting on him, but it is a very scary thing to have someone just appear in your line of vision. Additionally, on Friday, August 30th, around 7:30 p.m., an elderly couple was assaulted on that closed section of the road by at least one person who was wielding a knife. And the police, of course, responded quite swiftly to the assault, and they came with 4 police cars. And there were no serious injuries or incidents out of that. But the fact remains that that is only going to become more exacerbated. It's not going to dwindle. And, you know, regarding the bollards are not drivable. I'm an engineer. I would never drive, no matter what the size was, unless it was a semi truck. I could maybe try. Otherwise, I'd never drive a vehicle on that. So we need the road open.
Your time is up.
One-way alternating traffic. as soon as
Angela
possible.
Apple?
Thank you.
Paul Wellenkamp, Greg Novak, Ki Wu, and Catherine Luce.
Thank you for your time. I have owned a home in Estill Estate since 1989, and during that time, Lake Chabot Road has always been the fastest route to Eden Hospital. A patient who is forced with many medical emergencies, I know firsthand how minutes count. The road closure doesn't affect just Bayo Vista. It affects all of San Leandro. That is, with the closure, denying us a vital and direct route to emergency hospital and care. Over the past several years, I have been undergoing cancer treatment at Eden Hospital and regularly forced to travel to Castro Valley. Since the road closure, my travel time has significantly increased. I'm forced to navigate steep hills, blind corners that are not safe for true traffic. It isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous, especially with those of us with older vehicles like mine that struggle to get up the high hills, calling increased greenhouse gas emissions more than it would be from the gentle slope of Lake Chabot Road. I am here today to request on the behalf of the many patients who live on the other side of the closure to rely on quick access to Eden Hospital. I urge you to consider temporary opening Lake Chabot Road to one-way alternating traffic controlled by traffic lights. This simple solution would restore critical access for all San Leandro residents that depend on Lake Chabot Road to emergency care. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Wellenkamp, Greg Novak, Ki Wu, Catherine Luce, and Helen Catalano.
Hello. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I live on Astor Drive. I've been there for about 30 years now. The neighborhood has changed greatly in the last year or so. Those in favor of permanently closing the road suggest that perhaps they would enhance air quality. That's not accurate. Vehicles have not gone away. They've simply been rerouted. Lake Chabot Road is a short, direct route to Estadio Avenue. Traffic now goes up and down a very steep hill that Bayo Vista is on, rather than going around it. Even the shortest route is longer, much steeper, and has 3 stop signs. Lake Chabot road route has none. I'd also like to speak to those bollards, and I don't have any experience driving over them, but I did walk down there just the other day. There was a tree trimming crew there with a very large truck, one of the articulating buckets. And I noticed it working there. I walked on down. Bollards at the bottom gate had been unbolted. They were still standing there, but they had been unbolted. I walked around Lake Chabot, came back a few hours later. They'd been bolted. The tree trimming crew was gone. That big truck, they didn't want to drive that big truck over those bollards. I certainly doubt that most people would choose to drive their cars. 2 years to reopen that road is a long time. Something must be done now.
Thank you. Greg Novak, Ki Wu, Catherine Luce, Helen Catalano, and Zachary Lebow.
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Novak. I live on Astor Drive. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in front of you. I'm here today to passionately plead for you to promptly pave the path to reopen Lake Chabot Road to alternating one-way traffic. I do live on Astor Drive at the very top. Because the road has been closed now for more than 20 months, or could be almost up to 2 years, traffic is going up, across, and then down a very steep street in Bay Vista. Throughout the day, you can see and hear this traffic, including large trucks, often speeding, often blowing through stop signs, often sharply cutting corners, often honking horns. These are narrow, car-lined residential streets that have blind corners, no center dividing lines, no speed bumps, which were not designed to handle this sort of traffic. On March 7th, a tragic shooting closed Highway 580 that rerouted westbound traffic onto Lake Chabot Road from Castro Valley and then up the very steep Astor Drive hill through our neighborhood. That day, we endured hours of freeway traffic, including big rigs, lurching, bellowing pollution, blasting music, fully congesting a once quiet residential neighborhood. On August 31st, less than 2 weeks ago, there's another shooting on 580 that stopped traffic. Due to these types of events, 580 is being known now as the shooting gallery, and residents need a safer route to get between San Leandro and Castro Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Ki Wu, Catherine Luce, Helen Catalano, Zachary LeBeau, and Letha Zuber.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ki Wu. I live on View Drive, and our ask tonight is for the immediate opening of Lake Chabot Road for single-lane alternating traffic. My wife and I bought our house on View Drive in the year 2000. We've been here for a number of years because of the beautiful view and, of course, the quiet neighborhood that we thought what it once was. You heard from some of my neighbors already that are directly impacted by Lake Chabot Road closure on Astor Drive as well as View Drive. I live on the downhill or incline of View Drive. So as you drive down View Drive, there's a blind left turn. My house is directly on the left. So in addition to the exponential increase in traffic, the speeding as they approach the downhill side increases exponentially. They're probably driving in excess of 40 to 50 miles per hour. My neighbors and I have experienced extreme difficulty in exiting and backing out of our driveways. We've had cars honking at us. So the quality of life, I think, and I can speak on behalf of all of my neighbors, has been greatly diminished. Therefore, we'd like to ask for the immediate opening of Lake Chabot Road, single lane road and alternating traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Luce, Helen Catalano, Zachary LeBeau, Letha Zuber, and Mark Thomas.
I thank you all, and I really appreciate you serving our city, and I know all of you really care about our residents. I've been living in Bay Vista in San Leandro all my life, and I love living here. I am very concerned about the fire. I back up to a dead-end street that goes right up to Fairmont Ridge, and then there's an old deserted graveyard that is overgrown with eucalyptus trees. We did even have a fire several months ago that most of the residents helped put it out, but the fire department did respond quickly. But that's my big concern, is having fire evacuation roads. And that's why I didn't really agree with that map that there's 9 places to get out. I think there's only 3. But I really would urge you to really look at the whole San Leandro, along with the creeks, with our trees, and how we're right in the high season now for fire. I was taking care of patients from the Oakland fire. I'm a nurse, and I saw the seniors that really were impacted from that and the illnesses and injuries that occurred afterwards. So I really would ask that we would open up that to a one-way alternating road with lights as quickly as possible to use as an evacuation route. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Helen Catalano, Zachary LeBeau, Letha Zuber, Mark Thomas, and John Minot.
Good evening, councillors, staff, and first responders. Thank you for listening to my concerns. My name is Helen Cataldo. I have lived on View Drive since 1976. It was a beautiful, peaceful, quiet, and safe neighborhood. However, this has changed dramatically since the atmospheric storm. I respectfully request that Lake Chabot Road now be reopened temporarily to one-way alternating traffic with traffic lights at both ends. We are very concerned with safety. Traffic is speeding by using our narrow, winding, steep Bay Vista streets, especially Astor Drive and View Drive, as a thoroughfare to other destinations. Vehicles speed up and down, making it dangerous to back out of our driveways or even cross the street. I walk in the neighborhood every day and am subjected to noisy, speeding traffic in a hurry to get to their destination, spewing out fumes and pollution, with no regard to speed limits and the fact that this is a residential neighborhood of 35,000 residents and the roads are not freeways. We are also very concerned about evacuation in the event of a natural disaster, fire, earthquake, floods. September, October is the worst time of year for fire. Please listen to our neighborhood requests. We need you to temporarily reopen Lake Chabot Road now to one-way alternating traffic for it to be a viable evacuation route before a catastrophe. Thank you.
Thank you. Zachary LeBeau, Letha Zuber, Mark Thomas, John Minot, and Robin Thompson Webb.
Good evening, Council. Thank you so much. And just a quick shout out to Sheila. I think your professionalism is should be noted. We're very lucky to have you as a civil servant, so thank you for that. Yeah. I've been a Bay Vista resident since 2008. I know only 2 ways to get to my home. I gun to my head. I don't think I can tell you the other 7 that we noted on the map. And I think in an emergency, especially with the bollards being a place on Lake Chabot Road, like I would turn around. I would look at that and say like, oh, that's not actually open to emergency traffic, and would back up and go a different route. I don't think that's feasible, and we need to open Lake Chabot up to alternating one-way traffic now. I think that's the most important thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Letha Zuber, Mark Thomas, John Minot, Robin Thompson Webb, and Catherine Ralph.
I just want to say thank you, council members, fire department, everyone for all you do for the city. You know, I live on View Drive. I encourage each of you, before you make any decisions, to drive the route. We have multiple blind hills. We have multiple blind corners on View Drive, and as well as Astor Drive. So this is, and I want to commend my neighbor, who said she was formerly on the planning department, who pointed out the general plan and the difference between a road, Lake Chabot Road, and a neighborhood street. We have no lines. There are, I don't think, any speed signs. This is not the same kind of road, and the city of San Leandro has solved the problem without addressing it as a different kind of road. So I just want to bring that up. Thank you so much. That was astute. Really, what I would ask is that if you cannot open the road, if you determine not to open the road immediately, I would ask that you provide a detailed study with numbers, not just from one day, but from multiple days, multiple times, charts, numbers, etc. And then you make an improvement needed to continue to use View Drive as you intend to use it temporarily. And I also want to indicate to those people who care so much about the environment, you're not going to save $11 million by closing the road. It will cost money to keep it closed.
Thank you. Mark Thomas, John Minot, Robin Thompson Webb, Catherine Ralph, and Kat Wellman.
Hello, council members. Thank you for your time. I couldn't do your job. I've lived in Bay Vista for 18 years, and it kind of amazes me that Lake Chabot has been open for 100 years. And because of a natural disaster, we're just going to close it and turn it into 2,100 long foot park when we have a beautiful park right below it, like literally right below it. I had a friend who was in the Oakland fires, and one thing that she stresses to me is it was absolute confusion. Nobody knew what they were doing, where they were going. And I'm telling you, those bollards and that gate, and people are not going to want to go over them. It's going to be very confusing. Everything is going to load onto Benedict. Benedict only has 2 ways to get out of it. One is on Grand and one is on Estudillo. And there's going to be other people coming down Estudillo. It's a bad plan to keep the road closed. We need it to be open, and one way would be okay for right now, but let's open it completely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. John Minot, Robin Thompson Webb, Catherine Ralph, Kat Wellman, and Linda Watkins.
Good evening, council members.
I'm Robin Thompson Webb, and I've been living in Bay Vista for the last 31 years. I have 3 bullet points that I want to bring to your attention: speeding traffic on Astor Drive and View, hazardous blind curves, and dangerous donuts being conducted on the bottom of Lake Chabot and Astor Drive. Speeding traffic up and down Astor Drive and View, a road that was not meant for such a large amount of cars, has made our streets a dangerous place to drive. If the city of San Leandro is looking to boost its coffers, they could easily assign traffic personnel to just monitor the 2 streets for the day and hand out $90 tickets. At least 2 daily salaries could be paid by the fines due to all the illegal speeding. Both Astor Drive and View have many blind curves. Many times after surveying the street and then backing down out of my driveway, before I can turn my head around, I see cars less than 5 feet from my bumper. They cannot see me back out, and I cannot see them due to the curve of the street. This is dangerous and needs to be stopped. At night, we are getting cars performing loud donuts at the bottom of the hill. The donut drivers then have an easy escape route going up Lake Chabot Road to Castro Valley. We should not have to endure this obnoxious noise because it is almost impossible to get caught because the gate and the bollards
Your time is
are
up.
blocking Lake Chabot Road. Thank you.
John Minot, Catherine Rouse, Pat Wellman, Linda Watkins, Ed Hernandez. John Minot. Oh, he left. Okay. Catherine Rouse, Pat Wellman.
Hello, I've lived in San Leandro for 33 plus years now, and I'm here to help you realize that prior to traffic on Lake Chabot Road was not just Castro Valley residents, as I've heard one of you say at least, but even if it were, wasn't that they were taking a shortcut, but as a means to patronize San Leandro offices, businesses, doctors, and agencies. And on the other hand, San Leandro residents who regularly use this arterial like I did, used it to get to our own town for same purposes, as well as meetings with friends and accessing the 580 freeway. Now I can't get to it without winding through the neighborhood in front of so many of my neighbors' houses, as they've been describing. This didn't end when my son got too old for being transported to school and piano lessons and all his things that we were doing then. But then he became a driver, so adding to the traffic. I'll point out that since the closure, not only Castro Valley residents and other outsiders are careening around the hill and the streets now, but our own neighbors and friends are being forced to do the same at more environmental cost in gas for our cars challenging the steep hills and behind those curves. And if it were over 3,500 cars a day on Lake Chabot Road before the closure, those are still happening now and won't stop because of that closure. One more thing with the closure, there are now noticeably more dumping of trash, big and small, along Lake Chabot Road. And this was drawn to our attention by a service provider who comes to our house from the Lake Chabot Road. She noted that appliances, mattresses, an old school bus, and piles of debris. We need to reopen that road and have it more patrolled. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Wellman, Linda Watkins, Ed Hernandez, Eric Hahn, and Ed Cable.
Good evening. I'm president of the Bovia Association. I'm also chair of the Reopen Lake Chabot Road Coalition. I so appreciate the council listening to us. We have felt that our concerns have not been considered, and we felt this is the only way that you would actually hear our voices. We need the city council to immediately reopen Lake Chabot Road with alternating one-way traffic controlled by signals at both ends for minimal cost. This is an urgent matter of public safety. First, with fire season at its peak and high winds coming, we must have reliable evacuation routes. Imagine trying to escape at night over bollards, which no one wants to drive over now, onto a road you haven't driven in 2 years that may not even be safe. Second, as you have heard, the closure has diverted traffic into steep residential streets of Bayo Vista, creating serious hazards for those residents. Speeding through narrow, unmarked streets with blind corners, endangering hundreds of residents, damaging roads, and increasing gas emissions. A 2,100-foot road to walk and ride bikes should not take priority over the safety over 3,500 Bayo Vista residents. Please reopen Lake Chabot Road now with this temporary fix to protect public safety before it is too late. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Linda Watkins, Ed Hernandez, Eric Hahn, Ed Cable, and Monica Poindexter.
I am Linda Watkins. I live on View Drive, which has become the main thoroughfare from traffic coming from Lake Chabot Road. So of course, I'm concerned about the increased traffic, but especially the road conditions. The road, like others have mentioned, there's cars parked on either side, so that narrows the center of the road quite a bit. And then the road is very steep. I drive a manual transmission, and sometimes I get forced off to the side if someone's coming around a blind curve and I'm coming the other direction. But I'm most concerned about fire danger and potential escape routes. It's very important to me that we have options and not, right now I have one way out of the neighborhood. The Ballards and the answers that we've gotten don't give me confidence that I would be able to drive over it with my little Fiat 500 car, which is teeny tiny. It's like a clown car. Would it make it over? Would it get stuck? I have no idea. So I'm asking the city to reopen the road to one-way traffic while a more permanent solution can be worked on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Hernandez, Eric Hahn, Ed Cable, Monica Poindexter, and Debbie Anderson.
Good evening, Council. Ed Hernandez, not from the Bayo Vista area, but Assumption, living in the community, seeing what's going on. But as we know, safety is the biggest priority in San Leandro. Over 100 people responded to a survey showing that we're going in the wrong direction. We can see the room packed with concerns in our community, but safety, how to really manage it. We are one San Leandro. We fix our roads, we fix our bridges, we take care of community, we invest in it. We don't let people suffer. We have 3,500 residents, sample population here, who are concerned for their safety and well-being. We need to do better. We need to find a way forward to open this road quickly and safely, so that way people are not concerned for their well-being. Knocking on some of these doors in our community, we're hearing they don't even want their kids to play in the front yard because worried about their kids getting hit. So the quality of life is suffering, where people don't feel safe in their own neighborhood, even the streets. So we need to do better. We're calling on you to do the job to really fix this road now, reopen it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Hahn, Ed Cable, Monica Poindexter, Debbie Anderson, and Tim Dallas or Tim Ballas. You will be the last speaker.
Great. My name is Eric Hahn. I'm a fellow resident of the Bayo Vista community. I'm also one of the moderators for the Open Lake Chabot Road.com website. I wanted to share with you a few key numbers that we've collected from the data of the petition being signed on the website. Right now in my hands, I've got about 1,100 signatures. Very passionate residents who are supporting opening Lake Chabot Road. And we just started collecting this only 7 weeks ago. So that's almost 160 signatures per week, or about 25 signatures per day. I just also want to let you guys know that it's not only San Leandro residents that are worried about this. We've got 70% of the signatures that are coming from San Leandro residents, but about 30% of the signatures are from residents in Castro Valley, Hayward, Oakland, and San Lorenzo. So that kind of fuses the point that ultimately that there's all the neighboring communities are also worried and affected by this, not only the residents in that street in the Bayo Vista community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Cable, Monica Poindexter, Debbie Anderson, and Tim Ballas or Dallas.
Good evening, City Council. Thank you for having us here this evening for hearing our concerns and our feedback. I'm Monica Poindexter, and I am a Bayo Vista resident. I actually live on the corner of View Drive and Astor. And as you come up View Drive or Astor, my house is right at the top of the hill. So I am on the receiving end of every single car that passes and comes up Astor Drive. I hear and I see a lot that happens on that street. The flow of traffic that is coming up and down. You drive and up Astor Drive passes my home. The loud cars, the loud music, the speeding cars that are day or night. I walk every day. And just like many of my neighbors that are here today and some that have already left that walk, I know by name and by face. We worry when we have to cross the street. That was not a fear that we had or that I had over 10 years ago, but that is a fear that I have now in the last 20 months because of the extreme amount of traffic that is now happening on our street. The crime has increased. And it is not something that I expected to experience when I bought my home over 10 years ago. So as a city council, you have a neighborhood that is asking for your help. You have a neighborhood that is willing to work with you. Please be respectful of the lives that are in this room and that are representatives of this neighborhood. Please open Lake Chabot Road to one-way traffic.
Monica Poindexter, Debbie Anderson, and Tim Ballas. Okay, Debbie Anderson? Nope.
Sorry,
Ed
Ed Cable.
Cable.
Yeah.
You guys
Um,
keep the line.
Addressed this group before. I'm here to talk physics. The road damage, as I emailed you previously, occurs to the fourth power of the weight of a vehicle. This is physics. It doesn't matter how aroused your emotions are. You cannot get around this by putting more cars on the road, on a road that was built on shale, sandstone, and siltstone. You're going to increase damage. You have a viable emergency route out now. We have 140 years of working with this road, and it probably should never have been built there the first time because you don't have the structural integrity in the substrate to support a road like that. It's okay. It's what it is. So let's figure out what we can do and protect the residents of the neighborhood by then moving the blockage so that only local residents can access the neighborhood. That seems to be the most reasonable thing to do. I can't stand here and say you should spend $4 million or $11 million when you have a $4 million budget for half a mile road when you have 174 miles of road within the city that you need to take care of. That kind of discrepant spending for a small amount of road isn't economically justifiable. But you could protect the residents by making it a neighborhood-only road, so you fix a lot of the problems with the cars using it as a thoroughfare. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Anderson, and then Tim.
Council, I want to thank you for your patience this evening and hearing out all of our voices. My name's Debbie Anderson, and I've been a resident of San Leandro for 28 years, and I live on Chabot Terrace. Last year, for about 4 months, I actually commuted on Crow Canyon Road out to San Ramon, which was set up with a temporary signal for alternating one-way traffic. This resulted in a 10 to 15-minute delay every morning with literally 30 or 40 cars backing up at a red light signal. I feel like the idea of the alternating traffic would be viable, but I think this is going to have major repercussions on the residents in my neighborhood. Not only do I feel it's a bad idea because of the volume of traffic and delays, but the homeowners who are on zero lot lines would not be able to get out of their driveways. And with the frustration, people would be using our court as a turnaround. Secondly, I just want to mention that last year or year and a half ago, when the road was closed, it took about 3 months before we saw a diminution of traffic coming out in our court. People would be U-turning in our court. Dozens of people every hour would be U-turning in our court. So I feel like to open the road and then need to subsequently close it at some point for repairs is not only going to cause confusion for San Leandro residents, we're going to have to deal with that re-education process all over again. Please keep the road closed.
Thank you.
Fixed. Thank you.
Tim. And this, Mr. Mayor, this is the last public speaker in person, and then we have 4 hands up online.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thanks for the time. Tim Ballas, 28-year resident of San Leandro. Been in Bay Vista about 12 years, live on Longview Drive. Really appreciate the time. As I've said a number of times, good risk managers enlist the help of subject matter experts. We all struggle with technical issues because many of us are not engineers. So we defer to the experts. So I'd encourage engagement of Kittleson as much as possible. I'd invite them to come here and present to you so that they can answer your technical questions. CAL FIRE has designated Bay Vista as a high-risk fire rating. That's a big concern for us. I live there, my family's there, my home equity is there. I would submit that we are not fear mongers in the least. We have our families and our home equity to defend and protect, and that's really what you're hearing from us. I did live through the 91 Oakland Hills firestorm. I saw exactly what something like that is capable of doing. 3,000 homes went down in less than 4 hours. 25 lives were lost, and $3 billion in $24 were lost. $3 billion in losses in 2024 dollars. The topography of our hills and the housing density are very similar to the Oakland Hills firestorm. We have a vulnerable population in Bay Vista, as you've heard. And every route, not just evacuation routes, but every route is crucial in that kind of situation. I can personally attest to that. And the last thing I'll say is we purchased our homes in Bay Vista with a reliance on the fact that we had an emergency evacuation route to depend on. That is not available to us now. And what you're hearing from us is we need that back, at least in the interim until a permanent solution is identified. Thanks again for the time.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, there's no more public comment in person.
Okay, let us go to online public comment, please.
Gunter, you may unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm Gunter Mihaiescu. I live on, well, Estadio near the closed portion of Lake Chabot Road. And look, I think a big part of it is education. I think we need to educate people and put signage up that there is an alternate route. There's always been a better alternate route in Fairmont Drive. I grew up in Castro Valley. And we, as a family growing up, before I could drive, we hardly ever used Lake Chabot Road. Fairmont Drive is much faster, and we didn't live in a part of Castro Valley where we took Redwood ever. We always went up Fairmont to the intersection of Fairmont, Lake Chabot, and went over Fairmont to 580. I commuted from Castro Valley to Berkeley. I went to college in Berkeley, lived in Berkeley, would come back for dinners, never needed to use Lake Chabot Road. So it's been overused. Frankly, even before the closure, something had to be done to redirect traffic over Fairmont. And now it should not be. I feel bad for the residents of View and Bay Vista that should not be getting an influx of traffic. The road should be, frankly, traffic should be rerouted. Signage should be put up. Trucks should not be allowed to use the road. We don't allow trucks on 580. We could put similar restrictions on Lake Chabot Road. We need to do something. I mean, obviously, I want to keep the road closed. Even if it's decided, hey, the road is going to be reopened now, it's not going to be reopened for a while, we could still implement these measures now to do something now to make Bay Vista safer. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian LeBeau, you may unmute yourself. Brian LeBeau. Okay, we're going to move on. Glenn Brown, you may unmute yourself. Glenn Brown. Okay, we're going to move on. Douglas Spalding, you may unmute yourself.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. Well, San Leandro, I've been listening to this whole long discussion. Whoop. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
You can't fool Mother Nature. or you can spend a lot of money trying to defy her. So we could spend tens of millions of dollars reopening Lake Chabot Road and then maintenance from that point on. We could use it to dredge the marina. We could bolster the San Leandro Police Department, or maybe we could even spend money on human services, but we can't do it all. So as former Mayor Cassidy suggested, it's a political decision that you have to make. You have to set priorities. I live in Old Bayo Vista at the corner of Graff and East Wana. I'm sensitive to cars bombing down the Graff grade where the children do play. But I'll tell you one thing I don't miss. I don't miss the car speeding on the Estadio Expressway as I try to turn left on Parker. That's been a nice traffic calming effect. So, you know, if the traffic is, I have to say traffic, there's not traffic on my street, which is one way out. But, you know, maybe this is a traffic problem. We have to figure out how to calm it on Astor and View. To those that want Lake Chabot Drive as an emergency exit, the way to preserve it is to leave the fence up and the bollards up so that we don't put load on the road, as the geologist just suggested. Leave it intact for when we really need it as an emergency. And I'll bet in 15 minutes, all those bollards will be unbolted and we can make our way. But you're just funneling more people into Estadio where there are already 4 of the exits you talked about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Glenn Brown, we will try this again.
Glenn Brown. I moved to Bay Vista in 1963. I've had a long time to watch how the traffic flows. I am a civil engineer. I am concerned about 2 things, the lawlessness and the traffic safety.
Glenn, can you mute your other login because we're getting an echo?
Okay.
He's on 2 accounts. No, you can unmute the one you're on, mute the other one.
Sorry, I don't see a place to mute. Anyway, move the closure to the city limits.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, there's no more public comment.
Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. As folks may know, City Council usually ends at about 10 o'clock. We have not had a break yet. We usually have a break at about 9 o'clock, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. So we are going to take a bio break. It's important to stretch legs, let people get some water, etc. We're going to make it quick. It's going to be 10 minutes. Looking at the clock, we will be back in our seats at 9:57, at which point I will take a motion to extend for some period of time so that we can discuss everything that we have heard. Okay, so right now, we stand in recess for 10 minutes.
Can you put the camera back on, please? And remove the wallpaper.
Okay, let us reassemble. Okay, so at this point in time, having heard our presentation, explored a variety of questions and heard from the public, we will go to council members for discussion, comments. Councilmember Blue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I understand, this is a work session. We're supposed to just provide some feedback to staff for the next direction. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you to those who came out tonight and those who joined us online. And thank you particularly for your comments acknowledging the incredibly hard work our staff does and my colleagues do. Someone said, I couldn't do your job. Yeah, you could. You just wouldn't sleep as much as you do now. Thank you, Sheila, and your staff and the fire department, police staff. I do want to dispel one myth. There's a misunderstanding that was testified to tonight. I'm sure it wasn't intentional. I spent a few years working for the best police department in the world, the San Leandro Police Department. 2 of those years as the commander of the traffic division. For every $100 that's collected as a fine on a traffic ticket, the city of San Leandro gets less than $9. The average fine for someone who's found guilty of speeding, 22,350, is $328. So if you write them a ticket and they're found guilty to the average fine, not a lowered fine, the city gets $28 about 6 months later. Most of that money goes to domestic violence funds, post, training, other things. So it's not a moneymaker to write tickets. Let's just get that out there right now. If it were, we'd be parked at the bottom of View Drive with a radar gun. That being said, this is a very emotionally charged topic. It's a road. It's a road that has endured tremendous, weather things. We were getting ready to repair this road 10 years ago, and then more happened. I think what we have here is a community of people that live up in Bay Vista that care very deeply about that road and some sort of positive outcome. And the policymakers, as Mr. Cassidy said, do have to make a decision, and that'll be a decision that's made when I'm long off this council. But what I say now doesn't mean I don't care. It just means we need to have a balance. We have a petition signed by 700 San Leandro residents. That's 1% of our population. I've talked to people from other parts of town. I live on the west end, and some people there don't use Lake Chabot Road, aren't as familiar. And I've heard comments like, wait, Lake Chabot Road is closed? To, wait, where is that? So not everybody is as passionate about that. And as councils, we have to represent all 91,000 residents and more in business community. So it's a lot to balance. And I'm sure with our staff and their talent, there will probably be something that they can come to with recommendations for us. But I do think the policymakers will need a little bit more of a bigger picture. What's this going to cost when it's actually built 5 years from now? Because today's dollars don't translate to tomorrow's dollars. What's the stability of the road 5 years from now if we fix it right? What about people that live on Astor who are in danger of their houses sliding down the hill? Those rocks, that's unusual. That's geographic or geologic or some sort of movement that's not normal, and weather change. What are other viable alternatives? How do we give Bay Vista residents some peace so that cars aren't speeding up and down their streets if we don't reopen Lake Chabot Road? Where do we come up with the $11 to $15 million it's going to cost to repair this half-mile stretch of roadway? And at what expense to other things? I think those are the questions that really need to be answered. And I think the biggest question that needs to be answered, and I do have some experience, when the Angora fire in South Lake Tahoe broke out, I was there. My friend who later became the deputy assistant sheriff there was there evacuating people. And that was an evacuation routes that were getting closed immediately because the fire was going everywhere, but it's a different topography. So I think until that question gets answered, I don't know that this council will be able to make an intelligent decision about those evacuation routes and how much of it is alternative truth and how much of it is truth. I don't even know, and I have some expertise in evacuation. So I think that would be something that's going to be really important. I would love to see some methodology, maybe the Simplicity Act or something else, of sending this out citywide to ask what people think, not just the people that live in Bay Vista who are most affected. Maybe there's other people that use that road or depend on that road that we don't even know about. Or maybe the sentiment of the 91,000, or as I always say, the 89.9, would be, no, let's spend the money elsewhere, or let's do the one way, or I don't know if there's a polling mechanism we can use for that, other than proposing some sort of tax initiative that would cause us to hire a consultant who would then do that asking, and that costs a lot of money. So to the extent that there's passion, I still think there's a lot of unanswered questions for the members of this council, the 7 people that have to decide whether they want to commit to that kind of money to fix that road, and then what the guarantees might be, because that road, as someone said, and as some of us know, has been failing for a long time. The other thing I worry about is getting started and finding the red dotted frog that puts a halt to the whole program, or something like that. And it could happen. So the whole CEQA thing, the whole environmental impact report thing. So then you're $1.2 million in to find out you can't do it for less than 35 million. Who knows? So I think those are some unanswered questions that are going to have to be dealt with before the council is really empowered to make an intelligent decision on behalf of San Leandro. Thank you.
At this point in time, I'm going to entertain a motion to extend our meeting time.
I'd like to move to extend to 10:30, please.
Second.
So I've got a motion from Viveros Walton and from council members Viveros Walton, and a second from Councilmember Aguilar. Let's vote.
Councilmember Simon, your vote, please.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes unanimous. Mayor Gonzalez, yes. Councilmember Baloo, yes. Councilmember Bowen, yes. Vice Mayor Simon, yes. Councilmember Aguilar, yes. Councilmember Azevedo, yes. And Councilmember Viveros Walton, yes.
Thank you for that formality. At this point in time, the chair recognizes Councilmember Bowen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for everyone for being here and emailing and sharing and meeting. I want to spend some time acknowledging Sheila and the engineering team that's sitting in the back. I know how much work has gone into not just this project and this update, but so many of the projects that have come before us. I feel like you all, we live here together now, and it's great. And I really just appreciate that, because I know you are a small team and incredibly mighty, and your dedication is noted. I also want to say that I add to your traffic on View and Astor, because I go to Bayo with my kids, and so I try to go the speed limit as much as I can, and I can attest to the blind spots and the sun and all of that stuff. So I can speak to that. I think that there's 2 things I really want us to be clear about. One is that right now we are in the phase of addressing the emergency that occurred with the storms. We need to fix the slides. And in order to fix those slides, we had to get funding. And in order to get that funding, we have to do the NEPA study. And that is currently what's happening right now. So that's part of the requirement. And it does not sound to me like it is possible for us to not do that study or to keep the funds if we don't do that study. So I just want to make sure that when we talk about public safety is stabilizing the road. As is, it is not safe for us to open to traffic. It could be, there is a world where I imagine it could be, but that will require a lot of decisions and money and time that we still have to put into that. And I think one of the things that has become clear is this very real fear that people may not be comfortable or aware of driving over the bollards. And so I think that it would be useful for us to have an education campaign around that, to actually go out there and maybe demonstrate how it's possible to do so that people are aware. Chief Moore mentioned Zone Haven, and Zone Haven now is actually, I went to their website, is now called Genesis Protect, but everybody has access to it. They have an app, but all the information on that site actually comes from our local emergency services team, which includes fire, police, and community managers. So they will actually, I went on the site right now and there's, it says in my, my address, these are my routes to leave. These are the streets there are. This is the fire risk at the time. And so I think this month, especially during Emergency Preparedness Month, it would be really great for everybody to get their emergency pack together, understand where the evacuation routes are. A lot of people said that they didn't realize that there were other streets that lead there. It wouldn't hurt just to drive down those streets, because if everybody else is going down the other roads, it might be better for people to go that route people don't know. All of this is just a just in case preparedness. So I just, and that email or the website is protect.genesys.com. I think that that's just another tool. I am not in Bayo, but I'm certainly going to download the app so that I have this information. I think that the second piece to this is, what do we do about things now? Because clearly it is problematic. We've talked about, speeding, trespassing, donuts. I'm also very well aware of all of those things that happens in my neighborhood very often. I get a lot of emails about that as well. And so I think that an additional conversation, I want to say this, once the necessary repairs are done for the structural integrity of the slides, I look forward to a real discussion, a real conversation with the facts around the risks and the benefits of opening the road or closing the road or having the alternating 1-lane road. All of those things are absolutely possible for us to discuss. Conversations right now about whether or not we are opening the road or closing the road permanently is not something that's before the council. That could be conversations people are having, but certainly before us as a body, the question isn't, do we want to close this road permanently? I just want to acknowledge that for right now. That's not a conversation that at the stage of what we're trying to do for Lake Chabot Road. It's to stabilize the slides that are damaged. And then the last thing, if I can just have like 30 more seconds, is that we really need to focus then on how do we mitigate this traffic? How do we make it safe for the residents? Because you are dealing with something that is a byproduct of trying to stabilize this road. So the city gets 20 to 30 requests each year for traffic mitigation. Today, I went to go pick up my child for school, and a teacher pulled me aside and said, "Can I ask you a question as a council member? How do I get a stop sign in front of this intersection?" And so, it's a lot of people are constantly asking about that. We mentioned crossing the street or safety. There was on Dutton a car accident just this week in front of the school. I share that to say that there's a lot of Vision Zero and ensuring that we can all walk across the street safely, bike safely. That is a priority the city has. And we have that all over the city. This last year, Alameda County was the deadliest year for pedestrian and bicycle safety. And so it's a very real thing that we're trying to work towards. And so we want to make sure that it's safe for you when you're in front of your house and driving as well. And so if there's a way for us as a city to help prioritize in some way, finding traffic mitigation for Astor and for View, I would, want to have more conversations about that and support. I also want to acknowledge that there are many, many streets where there have been fatalities this year, where there have been severe bicycle accidents. And so that same mighty team of people are also working towards that. So I just want to uplift that so that we understand that there's a lot going on that we're trying to process. And so I hear you, and I really appreciate it. And I do really look forward to the conversations once we're able to get the road into a place, at least to fix the.
So I'm going to go to Councilmember Aguilar.
Thank you, Mayor Gonzalez. Thank you everybody for coming in today. And, I had a lot of great conversations with folks with regards to this. And, there's a quote that Abraham Lincoln says, "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today." So I think, what the ask is, what the community would like me to ask is to open Lake Chabot Road to one-way alternating traffic. And that's something that is a short-term fix. I mean, we have a big problem here that requires money. And I'm sorry, Pete, did you want to say something? Okay. So it requires funding. And we can get it. We just need to add it to our advocacy priority to get the funding at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level. When I advocated for a navigation center, I was told there's no money. It can't happen. Well, guess what? We found the funding. So we would have to do the work. I'm willing to do that work, to roll up my sleeves to make sure that we fix Lake Chabot Road so that it is functioning, it is safe for the entire city and for the residents to utilize, not only for pedestrians, for walking traffic, for alternating two-way traffic. It seems like it's where we feel like our hands are kind of tied behind our back and there's so much going on. But, you know, the folks who put me in this seat are the folks who are advocating here tonight that this is what they want. And I am someone that advocates for the community, not for myself. So, and what I'm hearing is that, you know, I would like to direct staff to do a few things. Short term, open Lake Chabot Road to alternating one-way traffic, and then work to conduct studies so that we can actually fix the road, get the funding. That means when we advocate in Washington, D.C. in March, for those of us that do go to D.C., is to talk to the Department of Transportation to say, hey, this is the funding that we were asking for. We humanize our pitch and talk about the folks that came to speak tonight of why they need this. There's public safety issues. You know, I've driven down View Road in Astor Court, and you know that road has just gotten deteriorated. I mean, there are potholes, and you know, it's just trying to get down to Benedict from View Drive. You know, just people are speeding down. They're racing. It's a safety hazard, and you know, it created this slide created a new route, like the folks are saying, for you know, to invite folks to see a different side of San Leandro, which is beautiful, but it's, you know, let's fix the old road, continue to move the traffic along Lake Chabot Road. I understand that, you know, there's advocacy on both ends, and also try to mitigate slowing traffic on that road so that the gentleman who came in and spoke today is not having vehicles crash into his lawn. I think, you know, we can implement some sort of speed bumps if that's allowable, and we can conduct a study. I know it takes time, it's work, but this is work that I'm willing to advocate for and willing to do. You know, I'm not here to say, I hear you and not do anything about it. I hear you and I want to do something about it. And so we are going to have to work together to get this done, and talk to our supervisors, talk to our state legislators, talk to our federal electeds to get the funding. It's there. We just got to get it. And I think this is a priority where we want to make sure that folks' lives are not at risk if there's a fire in the hills. We saw what happened in Lahaina. You know, that is just, you know, one way in, one way out. We don't want that happening in San Leandro. So, you know, your life is something that I really care about, and to make sure that, you know, we have accessible roads for folks to travel through in case there is a fire. It is fire season. And so I think, you know, my direction to staff is to work together to, you know, immediately open the road, do what we can to get that open, and try to ask for funding to completely open the road to fix it. And I'm willing to bend over backwards to get that done. Those are my comments. Thank you.
And just to make sure, as I track the notes and potential action items around which we consensus, I think I took 3 things. The first one being add it to the advocacy list. Number 2, to open a one-way traffic control. And number 3, I think, was traffic calming measures. Is that a
Yes,
third
traffic
request?
calming measures.
Thank you. At this point in time, I'm going to go to Councilmember Viveros Walton.
Thank you so much. First off, thank you to all of the Bay Vista and the rest of the community who showed up on advocating for your particular point of view. Also appreciate staff. I know that fire, our city manager, Sheila, PD, have met with all of the parties that have serious concerns, whether opening, not opening, traffic, all of that. So just my appreciation and gratitude. And I chose to speak last because I wanted to address some of the questions and concerns that were raised by the community and by some of the members, my colleagues here on the council. I think one thing is clear and is that we just can't continue the way things are now. I live in the neighborhood, but not only that, but I drive that every day because I have to drop my kid off at a daycare provider on the other side of town, off of Lake Chabot. And the traffic is not viable on that street. It was never meant to be a major thoroughfare. It was never meant to have the kind of traffic that Duran and Estudillo and all these other major thoroughfares have. And so while I acknowledge and I appreciate the urgency of safety throughout the city, I think that as a council, we identified quality of life and safety as a priority. And like, we just cannot get lost in the complexity of like the whole city. Like we have the ability to do something today, or at least soon, to address the quality of life issue that is before us today. I think when I've spoken to the neighbors that are on the west side of the closure, so closest to Estudillo, is that there was concerns around the speeding of the traffic that just has always been there because of the road. And I think I don't want us to just get lost in that. I think regardless of what happens to the road, we have to address the velocity of the traffic that goes through Lake Chabot Road. And I know that our police chief is very well aware of the speeding that has happened and that is happening, because I've talked to her about it and she's met with many of you already. So that's the one of the issues that I wanted to bring up is, regardless of what happens, the velocity of the traffic traversing through Lake Chabot as it is now is still unacceptable. And if the council moves to open, and I would hope and ask my colleagues to consider opening it temporarily one way to alternating traffic, there are still a lot of bumps that we're going to have to go through, right? I think there is a level of kind of driver psychology that we're battling against, kind of muscle memory of people thinking that Lake Chabot Road is quicker than Fairmont. And it's just a force of habit because people think a back road is quicker than going through a major arterial. So I think the where we place that is going to be a big conversation. And I just want to be upfront. I don't think anyone's going to walk out of whatever decision happens. It's not going to happen tonight because this is not it's a work session. But whatever the end result is, I don't think any of us are just going to get everything that we want. So I think we just have to come together, understanding that we're not going to get everything that we need, but my neighbor will, and I will too. So I would just like to close by asking my colleagues to continue to prioritize quality of life and safety, particularly of the folks on this neighborhood that have been affected deeply by this emergency closure that happened. I'll just leave it at that. I do want to talk about what the process will be. So maybe we can, if there is consensus on the council to move this forward, and I hope that there is, that we're able to talk about what the process will look like to actually have the conversation to say yes or no, because we can't have that within the format of our meeting today. So I'll close with that. Thank you for your time. And that is it.
Councilmember Acevedo, please.
Yes, I would like to see what the environmental study is on the road because it's safe for emergency, but I don't know if it's safe for traffic to be on a regular basis right now. So I would like to see that. And I would like some traffic calming measures to look into that into the neighborhood, because I did go into the neighborhood about 5:30 with with the Vail Vista, and I could see the impact of the traffic. And yeah, so something needs to be done, but I don't know how feasible it is right now with the road because I know it's deteriorating underneath. So yeah, I'd like to see the environmental study. So that's my.
Vice Mayor Simon, please.
Very good, robust discussion tonight. Really good to hear all the passion on both sides. I have some background. I too was there at the 1989 Oakland Hills fire. I grew up in Oakland, and I was there. I was there the day that it happened. I have friends that houses were burned down, so I understand the importance of fire safety, evacuations, and practice getting ready. My mom was also hit by a car on a very busy street, almost died. So I understand about traffic safety. Personally, I am a civil engineer, so I understand how to build roads and big picture problems like these geology problems are not as simple as they seem, especially if they've been sliding for many, many years. And then lastly, environmentalists. What can we do more to protect our planet and our environment? And we don't talk about it a whole lot, but I think we should continue to talk about the environment, both the pros and cons and whatever alternative we decide. But kind of breaking this up into pieces. The first I hear a lot is the dangerous traffic down View Drive. I wouldn't want to live on that street, what's happening now. It sounds horrific. Steep curves, and you have an older population that's driving up there. So it does not sound safe. And I'll just throw it out there. I haven't heard it talked about yet, maybe 1 or 2 public commenters, but potentially closing Lake Chabot Road at the San Leandro border. I know it's not popular. The county probably doesn't like it, but if that makes it safer for our residents in San Leandro until we can figure this out, I'm open to it. I know City of Berkeley closes some roads. So I think we should consider options in the short term to make it safe for people that live on View Drive, because it sounds extremely dangerous right now. And it maybe would help with the crime safety in the donuts. Emergency evacuation route is important. Again, back to the fire safety, we do need emergency evacuation route. I totally agree with that. But maybe we can also practice like we do in school. Kids do in school, they practice emergency evacuations regularly. How often do we do that in our city? Actually practice with residents, especially in high hazard areas like Bayo Vista. Perhaps that's something to consider. And are these bollards even necessary? Can we just take the bollards down and just paint emergency access? Have we considered that? So those are my comments, my thoughts. And I do want to place safety as a top priority. And I am open to immediate options to make it safe for traffic, and then also getting that emergency route open so people feel comfortable. If that means removing a bollard, remove a bollard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vice Mayor Simon. So at this point in time, it does not look like we have anybody else who wants to speak. So let me give a few of my own thoughts. I do like the way that folks have organized the thinking in terms of public safety and then traffic safety, traffic calming for the individual neighborhoods. I do have one question that's pending, Director Marquisas. I think Councilmember Bowen said it right, that right now the road is closed. It's just closed because it's not perceived to be safe for travel. And I know that you worked hard to get various funding. We got the, let's say, $2.something million. Is that money, we spend the money and then we get reimbursed, correct?
Correct.
So they don't just send us a pile of money and say, go have fun. We have to do the work. And then if they determine that we are compliant, then they'll reimburse us. Do we need to reopen the road to be reimbursed, or can we have a closed road that's paid for by the Federal Highway Administration?
Agreement, the current agreement for the emergency repair grant doesn't have any of those stipulations. It's an emergency repair, and from our understanding is if we conduct those emergency repairs, our costs are reimbursable.
Perfect. So I think at the big picture, what we're trying to do is stabilize that facility, secure that asset so that we can then make the long-term decisions that all the council members have referred to. Because right now, the decision in front of us really focuses on how do we most quickly and effectively stabilize the road so that it is safe. The question of how you define safety is a complicated question because there is nothing that's like, yes, it's safe or no, it's not safe. There are gradations of risk that are being taken by residents when they go on that road. So for example, it's clearly not safe for two-way traffic because the foundation is missing or part of the road. Correct? Correct. So I got a yes. So then that just begs the question, well, at what point does it become unsafe for one-way traffic? And we really haven't answered that question, I don't think, scientifically yet. That's part of the study and the analysis that we're doing right now. And so I think that that's one thing that I struggle with in terms of putting cart before the horse. I like the idea of having that science to make that decision. If we start from the premise that the road is unsafe, then I'd like to see the evidence of what it takes to shore it up and to stabilize it. But here's the question, the hard question. If we open it up to one-way traffic right now, would our residents be at unreasonable risk?
So in thinking about the narrowest portion of this roadway, you have about 12 feet wide. And it's the thought of how do you prioritize who gets to use this 12-foot wide roadway. And so if it is intended for the one-way operations, one way, but both approaches, you would be facing challenges for emergency response in that case. If there were any incidents that our fire department and police department would have to respond using that road, they would have to contend with the cars coming down the hill within that 12-foot wide segment of a roadway. Sorry, can I add also, in addition to bicycle and pedestrians, we would not allow through this one-way operations.
There are alternative routes for bicycles and pedestrians up other streets as well, right? It's not the only way to get. Okay, so just to then explore, I think that things like that, as I think about the competing needs, we keep talking about safety, 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 safety. We need to really have a thought through plan about how you address a one-lane segment with emergency vehicles that in theory right now are allowed to go up to respond to fire through that. But at the same time, we are saying we want residents to potentially come down. So I don't think from what I've heard tonight that we have yet thought through those contingencies. And so back to the request to kind of consider opening this up, I think I would frame that request in terms of going to facilities quickly with something that has thought through, okay, as a practical matter, let's say hypothetically we open it to one-way traffic control. How do we address, especially since we're at fire season, those competing needs and how we train, because we've talked about training and educating our residents. So to me, that's a real issue, because if we're going to increase safety, I want to make sure that we're increasing safety and not actually creating chaos at that juncture. That's one big picture thing, but I kind of sense that at least there's generalized agreement that we should kind of keep looking at this as a real option, subject to that full evaluation. Second thing, with respect to traffic, and this is as much for the chief as for the city manager and anybody else who plays a role in traffic mitigation. I have not heard anybody tonight say that either Lake Chabot Road or View Drive was consistently driven at reasonable speeds by the majority of people. And I can say from personal experience, the number of times that I saw cars careening down Lake Chabot Road, and even bicyclists going faster than they probably should coming down Lake Chabot Road. So whether it's Lake Chabot Road or View Drive or a combination of Graph and whatever that other street, Parker, I just feel like we have an enforcement issue. And it would be unfortunate. There are plenty of rural America stories where people get rear-ended as they're coming out of driveways or turning in blind hill locations, and you have catastrophic outcomes. So I think we need to be very mindful and purposeful. And I think that the generalized direction that I get is traffic mitigation, traffic calming by wherever it is, has got to increase because it is untenable right now. Again, I'm just kind of looking down the row here to make sure I'm kind of hitting the points correctly. At this point in time, no. At this point in time, no, please. The third thing that I want to cover, and it's kind of, I guess, my last point. We have a request, a suggestion for pursuit of funding, which I think is aligned to what we already have in our general legislative mandate to pursue infrastructure funding and to pursue grants. And I think that the specificity and the interest consistent with what Public Works has already done, but doubling down, saying, what is it that we can do to provide the resources to address this over a longer term is really important. And so in terms of the guidance for right now or heading into facilities committee, because remember, for the public, we can't take an action at a work session. But I do think that this has the urgency, the urgent interest of the public. And I think that whether it's the safety from traffic, the safety from fire, it is something that we need to speed up along. And I'll just point out that in May of 23, we had talked about this as a community that maybe by the end of 24, the road could be reopened. And through no fault of anybody's own, and NEPA certainly is throwing a wrench into this, right? We wanted federal money, we got federal money, and now we have to do a federal study. But I think we need to be really pushing forward on the stabilization and figuring out what are the realistic options for reopening the road safely, as opposed to just creating the chaos that one of the residents described at Crow Canyon Road. Because if there is a 10-minute backup, guess what people are going to do? They're just going to go down View Drive. So we will have literally achieved nothing, and they will be more frustrated. So I think the general guidance that you're getting from the council at this point in time is come back to us quickly, focused on funding. Number 2, traffic safety immediately on View Drive, but over the long term on Lake Chabot, the stabilization, and to explore options like with some science and some background, but how it could be reopened. Because right now it's kind of touchy-feely in the air. If you can open one lane, then what are the practical considerations in doing that? So I'm going to turn to city manager and say, no, that's a summary of what I heard. You have to execute on this. I just want to make sure that that's consistent with what you heard and if there's some clarification that you seek at this time.
Thank you, Mayor. As a point of consensus, that is exactly what I heard. Other thoughts? A majority of the council.
Okay. So with